Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He spent 23 years on active duty with the Airforce as a pararescueman. 18 of those years were split between Naval Special Warfare Development Group and CAG, of which he conducted 17 deployments. He's a partner with Foxtrot 3, which is an apparel company based on faith, family, and freedom, and also partnered up with Lifeline Rescue Tools, which has a really high-speed personal rescue tool that's worth checking out. He currently works for the Doolittle Innovation Institute, which is an Air Force research lab. Do you wear the coat?
Not yet. You got to earn it.
You got to earn it. All right, we'll get into that. And he's actually the first guy I've ever met in person with a deeper fucking voice than I have. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Chad McCoy. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Appreciate having me here in Dallas.
No, absolutely. I know you don't live here, so taking the time out of your day or out of your schedule rather, to travel here and beyond is both appreciated by me and I know the studio audience as well as the regular audience. Well, I've had a lot of requests to have Air Force guys on, specifically pararescue guys or CCTs, either of them. It never fails. Pretty much every episode there's somebody in the comments asking for you guys to come on, and you are the first. And especially given the amount of time that you spent at the commands that you spent them at, I'm really, really excited to sit down and hear your story, and I know the listeners are as well. So again, I'm very thankful for you to come here and share that with us. What's the last book that you read or are currently reading?
So I'm reading a George Orwell book right now called Road to Wigan's Pier.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's about...
That's a deep track book of his, huh?
What's that?
It's like a deep track book of his.
Yeah, it's about socialism in the UK, I guess in the early 1900s. Pretty depressing read.
Yeah.
So
because the normal shit day to day isn't bad enough.
It gives you perspective on every day and how good you have it. So while I'm complaining about things, I'll read that for a few minutes and bounce back.
That's awesome. Is it a super long fucking book?
No.
Not too bad.
Yeah, it's short enough for me to finish. So hopefully it won't sit on the shelf like everything else.
Yeah, no doubt.
Read.
What's the first bottle of cologne you ever rocked?
Man, it wasn't until I joined the military that I could afford cologne. I mean,
were you a Drakkar guy?
I wish that was high.
That was
I think it was like CK1.
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
The $20 version.
That's fucking good. First car you ever owned?
Chevy Malibu, not the cool one, the old 4-door box one. What? 81.
81, no shit.
Yeah, there's nothing cool about that car. You can drop the 81, just say I got a Malibu. But
yeah. What was it right when you turned 16 or?
Yeah, about that. So I had to get to school. I lived in Hawaii and didn't have a bus route where I was living. And so I had this car. It was like $600. It was primer gray.
Fuck yeah.
I taped it off and put some flames on it.
That's a shaggin' wagon if I ever heard of one. Yeah. That's awesome. What's the shittiest Christmas present you've ever gotten?
You gotta be careful here.
Well, I know who gave it to you then.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. I think they're all equally good and special.
You gotta fucking call somebody out. Your parents? I mean, your parents get you like socks?
I'm sure there's been terrible gifts over the years. I
can't think of it.
Try to bounce back.
Well, nothing says being grateful like complaining about a shitty Christmas present, right?
I'd like to take a quick second to shout out and thank our sponsor for today's podcast, Origin Labs and Jocko Fuel. Jocko Fuel is a great product. He's got a ton of products actually within the Jocko Fuel line. The guests and I enjoy them on the show. And outside, I take a lot of the supplements. I've got some of the Origin Lab jeans, boots, gis, and it's just all around American industry. They do a fantastic job really re-revolutionizing American industry from start to finish. It's all American made, all American sourced. Everything start to finish is made right there in-house, and they really do a phenomenal job creating the products and fulfilling the whole ball of wax. They've been a huge supporter of the Mic Drop podcast for a while now, and I really can't thank Jocko Fuel and Origin Labs enough for the job that they do for us And so thank you to you guys. I'd also like to talk about my brand of dog food that just came out. What are the 2 key components for canine success? That's effective training and proper nutrition. Fueled by Team Dog brings those 2 components to your family and best friend. The perfect nutritional balance that results in a higher mental acuity, energy, overall vitality, and even an improved appearance. Every product you will find in my company's store was born from the battlefield and not from the boardroom. Let my life's work help you become your dog's hero.
What is your morning routine on a normal routine day where you're in town and nothing crazy is going on?
Yeah, so it used to be wake up and go to the gym every morning and work, come home late, and put the kids to bed. But recently, I wake up at 5, read the Bible with my wife, we pray together, I get spend time with the kids, send them off to school, and then I kick myself out. So this has been a transition period for me, retiring from the military in April. And so getting back in a routine of lifting every morning is something I need to make a priority, but I've been really enjoying seeing the kids out the door and spending at least an hour with them in the morning, which I never had before. So,
yeah. How old are they?
11 and 9. Oh, wow. I'm sorry, my son just turned 12 last week. So 12,
okay.
12
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's an important time, no doubt about it. And, having gone through those ages, that's shit you never get back. And, I know there's been periods where I've had more or less, and you damn sure miss it when it's not there. So that's neat to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty cool experience to have kids at their age and being retired. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for the guys that are able to do a lot of deployments with kids. With that number of deployments that I've done, most of it was, single without kids. Yeah. And so a different level of a commitment to the guys that did it with little ones. So.
Yeah. So you just retired. I mean, how big of a whirlwind has that been?
I stepped straight out of retirement into a job, which I thought was a good idea. I probably should have just took a year off to go fishing every day. And, but, I thought that would be a healthy thing just to keep busy.
Yeah, I agree.
But, I moved post-retirement and a lot of changes. So we're figuring it out. I mean, it's a process.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so you said you were in Hawaii at 16. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, so I was an Army brat. My dad was an Army chaplain, so I spent my formative years in Hawaii, graduated high school there, and then I joined the Air Force. I was 17 when I enlisted and turned 18 very quickly thereafter, and didn't look back. So,
going back to a little bit of the Army bratedness, if you will, where were you before Hawaii? Was that, or at what age range were you in Hawaii?
So I guess 14 to till I graduated.
The first 14 years, was that bouncing all over the place?
Yeah, bouncing around. Did some time. We lived in France while my dad was going to school, so sold all our stuff in Long Beach, moved out to France, and went to French school, and not military related. Bebopped around the U.S. and ended up there. And I would have loved to stay in Hawaii, graduating high school, but it's just cost prohibitive, and I didn't really know what to do with my life. I knew I wasn't ready for college right out of high school, and I'm grateful. I did my college experience later on. I wasn't ready. I wasn't mature enough.
Yeah. So. I think the fact that you can recognize that, speaks to a certain level of maturity, I guess. But did you pick up any French when you lived there, or was it too young?
Yeah, so I went to French school. I spoke French.
Do you still speak any of it?
No, I don't.
Not any of it?
I went back to France a few years back. I was traveling through from overseas and, in a deployed, location. I came back and I tried to use French in a cab. Yeah. And the guy wouldn't even entertain me. He wanted nothing to do with it. He's like, dude, just speak English with me.
That's awesome. All right, so the formative years in Hawaii, one, did you have any siblings growing up? And two, what was the high school experience like in Hawaii as a quote unquote fucking haole?
Yeah, well, you don't have to quote unquote, man. That's what I was. I mean, so it's weird. So coming from the mainland to Hawaii, it's like going, from Texas to Afghanistan, right? I mean, everything's different. You stand out. So trying to get up on step, really quick within that environment, it's challenging. Have an older brother and younger sister, and I wanted to surf. I was like, I'm in Hawaii. I need to, see North Shore. I saw the experience. All I got to do is go through all these boards, and then eventually I'm charging, Waimea. But But yeah, so started surfing and had a great experience, surfing, skateboarding in Hawaii, and really enjoyed it. I've been back a few times. I still have a few friends that still live out there, but most people have moved to whether it be Oregon or Washington State or Nevada. But most people migrate out of Hawaii to the mainland just because it's so expensive.
Yeah. Do you have siblings?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many?
Older brother, younger sister, and older brother who was in the Marine Corps, and younger sister did some time in the Coast Guard.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. So
your dad was in the Army. Yep. You were in the Air Force. Brother in the Marine. I mean, almost.
Yeah.
You just left the Navy out on purpose, or what?
Well, I've been told coasties aren't Navy. That's been very clearly defined to me, but it's close enough, I guess.
We don't hear any Swabbies being called puddle pirates, right? So that's neat. I mean, such a service-based family that way. What did your brother do in the Marines?
He was an infantry officer.
Oh, no shit.
He fought in Fallujah.
Oh, wow.
The hard yards in Fallujah. And yeah, my grandfather was a tank commander in World War II. He fought under Patton, and so it's normal. It's for our family and service. To me, it's a little bit bizarre when you see families that don't serve, and not that I'm saying everyone has to, but and there's no expectation for my kids to do that either.
Yeah. Would you try to talk them either way if they wanted to at this point?
To be honest with you, I kind of feel like I paid the dues for them. I don't think they really have to.
If they wanted to, though, would you try to sway them?
Sway them which direction?
Either
yes
way.
Or no?
Or? Either way. I mean, if mine did right now, I'd say don't do it. That's me. Just with the things that are going on, the people that are in charge. And I know some people may hear that and say, well, that's how you change things. But anybody who's served knows that you're not going to join the military and change anything unless you stay in for 40 years, and at that point, you're probably going to be so institutionalized that you're not going to change anything anyway. Just from the user experience, I guess, from your standpoint, would you encourage your kids to serve or sway them not to?
Man, I'd hate them, to see this and say, yeah, Dad said no, but I kind of feel like you do. I'm glad I'm not in right now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to demoralize the folks that still are because, they got a tough row ahead of them. But it's a tough time to be in the military. It's a tough time to be in SOF.
Yeah.
With Afghanistan, abortion of an operation, it's really, it's a tough time. And so to throw my kids in the mix in that, it'd be a tough sell. I'd hope that they were in, some kind of, soft unit or elite unit, but the reality is that a lot of those, those big policies are implemented against everyone.
Yeah.
And so there's no no pocket that's protected from it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, no matter what they want to do, I'll support them to the best of my ability. I'd give them my opinion. I'd say, for me, I wouldn't do it. If you're asking me if I think you should, I would say no. If you still want to do it, hey, I'll be completely supportive of that. But I mean, that's how I feel about it. But it's an interesting thing, because I get asked that a lot. Having done everything that you've done, how would you feel about your kids? How did your parents feel about it, et cetera? And right now it's a tough thing to try to accommodate. But all right, so you graduate from high school in Hawaii. Did you catch any shit for being a white guy, or you fucked with all the time?
And I had friends that were local, so that helped, especially surfing on the west side of Hawaii.
Yeah,
some of the spots up there. If you're not with somebody, you're gonna get your ass kicked. And I used to have surf racks in my car that were removable, and they know, the Holly boys coming up to the surf spot and they'd steal them every time. No shit. And so eventually I had that piece of crap Malibu when I actually got a car, and my dad had them welded on top of the top so you couldn't steal them. But yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you talk about racism. There's a lot of racism in Hawaii, man.
Yeah.
And as long as you're part Filipino or something, you're good.
Yeah.
But as a white boy, there's no mercy, man.
Yeah, it's like fucking break point, right?
Yeah.
Or point break.
Point break, yeah.
All right, so once you joined right out of high school. Where did you go first?
So I went to boot camp, and our boot camp's all in San Antonio.
Okay.
And the funny thing is that I came in to be a PJ, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so these recruiters, they get incentivized to get kids to pass what we call the PASS test, which is like a physical fitness test. Hey, this kid can do this many push-ups, and you can run this fast. But out of all those folks that go into basic training, they also get incentives if you make it, right? And so I was one of those kids that was like marked with, okay, he's going to go try out to be a PJ. He's probably not going to make it. You know, he's $135. Like there's no way he's going to be successful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came into basic training that way. You know, upon graduation, I went straight over to our. It's changed now over the years. Obviously, this is 20 plus years ago, but to our what we called INDOC, and so INDOC is kind of like your version of BUDS. Your guys' process is a lot longer. This is just the entry, right? So it was 10 weeks, and it's all physical fitness. It's all running cows in the morning, and then pool in the afternoon. And so you just do this for 10 weeks straight, and there's all these gates you have to go through. But that was the first big test. Basic training was just an entry. Then INDOC was the actual challenge.
During boot camp, were there any other? I mean, how big is what do they call them? Divisions or battalions?
Yeah, they call them flights.
Flights.
Yeah.
And about how many kids are in a flight?
You're putting me on the spot here.
Welcome to Mic Drop.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember how many kids. I mean, there's a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, a couple hundred.
Yeah, sure.
What were there other kids that were in that same pipeline that were going to be PJs or CCT?
There's a lot of them, and real bold about it too.
Yeah.
And the kind of kids who were, remember, I'm a surfer kid at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm coming in to try to be, this pararescue guy, and there was guys that were beating their chests and in basic training that they're going to make it and this and that, and I just kept my mouth shut. And I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe I won't make it. I don't know. Wasn't super confident, I was just like, I'm gonna give it a shot.
Yeah. When you actually graduate boot camp and then go to that first 10 weeks of the entire pipeline for becoming a pararescueman, is that the highest level of challenge from a selection standpoint? Is that kind of this separates the people that really want to be here from those who don't?
The INDOC, the first course? Yeah.
And beyond that, is there still an element of that
selection?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not really. I mean, it's really training at that point. There's still attrition. Like there's still guys that get weeded out. Scuba school is the other one that was really hard, right? And so we went down to Key West to Special Forces Combat Dive Course with the Army. And so that's a big deal for the Army, right? And especially back in the day.
Yeah.
And so you had all these old crusty, E7s that were guys that I was like enamored to be around. I was like, holy crap, man, these are like no kidding Green Berets,
Yeah.
And I had just graduated 10 weeks. I was nothing. I had no badges on my, I had 2 stripes that they gave me as a gift. And here I am, my dive partner is this, this badass E7, Special Forces guy. And I'm like, that. And so that was the first, kind of, I guess not the first. It's kind of like that was another gate you had to go through.
Yeah.
Because everything else is a gentleman's course. Airborne's a gentleman's course, except running really slow. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Halo and
did you?
Yeah.
Did you go through Airborne at Benning?
Yeah.
As I remember when I was there. I mean, we don't go there now anymore,
Right.
and haven't for a long time. It's the same with you guys, right? But back then you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of you guys there when we were there. But
well, the funniest thing is, we go there after scuba school, and so you get this scuba bubble, and it's a big deal in the Army, but we're nobodies,
Yeah.
and no one knows what a scuba bubble is.
Yeah.
It doesn't even make any sense when you look at it, but
that's fucking
you
funny.
just look at goofballs, at Airborne.
Getting yelled at for having your hands in your pockets.
That's right.
During that 10-week selection course, I know you said it's just basically getting kicked in the nuts, but was there a part of it or an element to it that was the most challenging? Like what was to synopsize the hardest part about that? What was it?
Yeah, for me, I was tall and skinny, so you think I'd be decent at running. The runs crushed me. I was good in the pool. I was chill in the pool, and drown proofing sounds so dramatic, but I was like my calm time. I'd go down.
Oh, surfing.
I'd go down, take a piss in the bottom of the pool, come back up, take a breath, go back down. It's like this process, like meditation before meditation was cool, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, they'd have, it's probably very similar to every selection. They have the really fast instructor in the front, and they have the, semi-fast one in the back. And the deal is you got to stay with the guy in the front.
Yeah.
But if you fall behind the guy in the back, you're basically quitting by your actions.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of that for me was mentally difficult. I was like, and I hated running. And going through selection made me hate running even more.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm retired, I went on like a casual jog the other day. And I felt myself looking at my clock, like, what's my pace? I'm like, I don't care anymore. Just go whatever pace you want, man.
Oh, that's good stuff. I mean, that's how it ought to be. I'm right there with you. I fucking hate running. I mean, back when in buds, I hated it. And then for whatever reason, I don't know what happened. Like I had 7 stress fractures when I graduated buds. Wow. And during airborne and SQT and all that, they kind of healed up. And then when I finally made it to Team 3 and started to do the team runs and run, swim runs and stuff, it was like something happened. It was like getting kicked in the back of the head by a mule and going cross-eyed almost. Like all of a sudden I could run. Like I'd never been a great runner. I mean, I wasn't bad, but just all of a sudden I became fairly good at it. And then a few years later I got valley fever and lost almost half my fucking lung capacity, and that went to shit. But I've hated running for a long time now, ever since then. Plus, I was 160 pounds back then, and I'm a fair bit heavier than that now. So, but all right. So you go through the tough selection 10-week course. Do you go right to airborne after that?
Yeah. So I went to scuba school first.
Oh, that's right. So how long?
Indoc was difficult in the pool because it was basically like a longer, you call this a pre-scuba course. And so you look at like the Rangers, they would do a pre-scuba course. They went to Key West. SF was the same way. We used to send guys to the buds, the dive portion.
Yeah.
It was like I don't know if a year or two that we sent guys there because we were just trying to figure out how do you get guys qualified to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we go there, finish that. Next up was airborne. And so airborne SEER courses, went to free fall, so at Yuma, which was really fun. I mean, think about that, being an 18-year-old kid. I turned 19 at Yuma, and I never had a birthday in the military before. And I work in an office with a bunch of civilians now. And birthdays, they bring cake in. I never experienced that in the military, but my first military experience with a birthday was them duct taping me to a pine tree or one of the palm trees out there in Yuma and leaving me out there. And so then you start to understand, like you're starting to get ingrained in the culture and what SOF is and what teams are and being around adults, you know, because I was still a kid. I hadn't matured, and you're kind of seeing how to behave and for better or for worse. But yeah, from free fall. Went to, I'm trying to think what was after that in the pipeline. The long and short of it is it's about 2 years long. And so you go to PJ school in Albuquerque, you learn medicine. I'm sorry, that's what I'm forgetting, is that I went to the 18 Delta course at Fort Bragg. And so there was a stint where they sent Air Force guys to this course. And we were kind of like the second test case of this. And the SF guys hated us being there.
Really?
Yeah, and so they still had SEALs going through it. They still had SEAL Corpsmen. So you had SEAL Corpsmen, you had the Air Force guys, and then everyone else.
Yeah.
And they just despise having these young, cocky Air Force kids in there. And I think the SEALs kind of despised them. And it was just all this kind of
everybody
tribalism.
fucking hates each other.
Everybody hates each other.
So I'm assuming you said they tried that. They don't do that anymore. The pipeline now. So you have your own.
They bounced it around here and there, but I was talking to some folks about medicine a few weeks ago, and all of the medicine that was taught back then, this is pre-war, was all conceptual. It's like, hey man, we think this is how this goes down. No one had really dealt with casualties.
Yeah.
No one had ever been part of a let's say a V-bib blows up and you got blast injuries and people jacked up. Like no one knew how to anticipate those things in training back then.
Yeah.
And so it's like really old school methodologies. It was all, based on algorithms. It was kind of run through your checklist, and they would get you the gotcha moments where like, hey, you didn't say, you put on gloves, during your verbalization of this, and then fail you for that stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the training the guys go to, it's like, man, it's top notch, and a lot of great experiences that have been relayed in ARs, and a lot of really great lessons learned the past 20 years that are continuing to be, kind of demonstrated within those processes.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. So is the actual PJ school now still in Albuquerque?
Yeah.
And is it completely in-house, like the entire medical portion of the pipeline is
So
all?
the medical's being done by a contract right now. And so it used to be the University of New Mexico, which I kind of always had heartburn just having, it's a paramedic program, right?
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be teaching, combat medicine. And so it's trying to find that balance. The Army's done a really good job at it. Their course there at Fort Bragg is awesome. Yeah. And it creates great medics. But I mean, the guys are still excelling. They're still doing great on the battlefield. And so I think some of that comes, post-graduation when they become, a full-fledged PJ. Are they a lifelong learner? Do they want to continue to be good at medicine? Which I'm sure we'll talk about. But, my role as a rescue guy in the back of a helicopter is very different than my role with a SEAL team, right?
Yeah.
And there's an expectation when you're with a small team.
Yeah.
Your game has to be here, and the stakes are higher.
For sure. Yeah. No, I get that. How long is PJ school as it stands now?
Man, I don't know. I mean, it's got to be what? You put me in a weird position right now. I should know this, right? It's probably 2 or 3 months.
Okay. So, I mean, that's
So
still...
all in all, it's a process of about 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's barring any injuries, right? So a lot of guys would go through their whole first enlistment, have to re-enlist before they even became a PJ.
Yeah.
Because they would get hurt,
Yeah.
or get set back.
I guess just thinking of it from the comparison to 18 Delta as an example, I mean, the short course is, 6 months?
Yeah.
The long course is like over a year, right? Yeah. So I'm just curious, I guess the question that kind of pops in my head in hearing that is that, 2 or 3 months doesn't seem like a real long time to get to where, and what would you call that, like an EMT equivalent, or is it higher than that?
Yeah, so paramedic is separate than that. So PJ school is just them doing employment. It's kind of putting everything together because, you learn how to jump out of an airplane at free fall school, right? But that doesn't mean anything for employment as a PJ. You got to learn how to do what we call RAMS packages. And so RAMS, you guys do something similar, I think. You think about like a hard duck, but this is folded up. We jump those things out of the back of C-130s to rescue, let's say a pilot floating in the middle of the ocean. And pushing jet skis out of the back of the bird and doing all those kind of high speed employment things, but it's taking everything and putting it together.
Like tactically.
So, what's that?
Like tactically.
And tactically as well. So the ground tactics are taught there. We shot pistols and M16s, through in basic training, but really weren't proficient at anything until, I don't even think I was proficient after PJ school, but then you're actually getting into the tactics. And
So I guess maybe I had it confused. PJ school is not paramedic or medical training so much as it's
employment. It's putting all those skills together. Ropes rescue is a big part of being a PJ, right? And so they do the mountaineering stuff there, do all the confined space stuff. Being a PJ is being a master of contingencies, and really the expectations are significant to say, if you and I are rolling out in something and I'm in a vehicle. How do I respond if I'm QRF? How do I respond to get this vehicle off the X? What do I need in this vehicle, to make sure that if you get shot up, I can pull you out? Do I have HLZ set on the backside? And so it's just this constant like flip book of contingencies, right? And so, and PJ school is just a taste of it because you can never teach everybody this. And you don't really need to because a lot of it's mission specific.
Yeah.
Not every mission is going to be that complex. If it's in the back of a helicopter, it's a little bit more linear, I guess.
Yeah.
That's way to put it.
So you guys are like professional fixers that way, then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of the problem solving crew. So after PJ school, do you go through paramedic after that or before it?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
you still do medicine there, right? So if you do an FMP at PJ school, you're incorporating, hey, you had to do employment to get there, and now you're treating this patient. Maybe you're going to rappel him, in a package down the side of a mountain, and then exfil him. So the medicine's incorporated into those FMPs.
Okay. PJ school is the last bit of the pipeline.
Yep.
That makes sense. So you basically learn each block independently, and then at the very end, bring everything together to kind of meld it. So, I mean, it sounds similar to our version is called STT or SQT, SEAL Qualification Training. Once you finish with that, then you go to whatever unit you're going to be attached to. Is it similar to the SEAL teams in that when you show up there, it's like, yeah, you did all that and that's great. You still don't have a fucking clue what you're doing. And now you've got really a couple of years of on-the-job training before, you really feel like you have a fucking clue what's going on. Is that
100%?
Yeah.
And there's also some other similarities in the fact that there's two different pathways for PJs. Is that some guys go to STS, so they're special tactics units, and some guys go to rescue squadrons. And so I guess the only parallel I could draw, maybe it's like being an STV guy, vice going to one of the other teams. And
what is the difference between the two? So
rescue guys, their sole purpose is to support air crew, ejecting over bad guy land. And so they're basically internal teams of, I guess it's really an a la carte menu, but they'll have the guys off the 130 crew to jump in. They'll have guys on helos. If you go to a special tactics unit, you're within special operations. So one is Air Combat Command, which is like, it's the fighting force of the Air Force, but it's not SOF. And so this kind of departure from two missions has created some problems with unity of effort for us. Yeah. And there was a big push to have all the PJs under SOCOM. And so that was happening a few years back, and we're all excited about being under one umbrella. We could, standardize training, we could standardize funding, all these things. And, we had high hopes of what that was going to become for us. But, the ACC and some other folks were like, holy crap, we can't lose this capability. So it's still the same PJ. It's not better on either side. It's just different. I just happened I started my career on the rescue side. So I went to Nellis Air Force Base in Vegas, and I was a rescue PJ. And then I got an assignment for Okinawa, Japan. So I was a rescue PJ over there. And so, I got to do some rescues, some real rescues, which I thought was really cool. But then, I'm sorry, there's a third option here too. The third one is the guys that go to the Guard and Reserve. And those guys, you talk about having big balls. Those are the guys that are doing the civilian rescues. Of Mount McKinley, in the Alaska crew, they're notorious for being, the best mountaineers. The guys out in Long Island, New York, who are doing open, the perfect storm, that was them that jumped into that thing, risking their lives to save, a merchant vessel out in the middle of the ocean. And so they're doing it on a whole different level. And so you kind of have these different pathways of things that you can do as a PJ. So when the war kicked off, I decided I wanted to be a special tactics guy. And so that's kind of where I culminated, the formative years, I guess, of my military experience. But
would you say, I know you said there's not really a hierarchy, but it seems like the STS is kind of that's where the guys really want to go. Is that fair?
So there's actually another, I know, man.
All right, so I swear that's the last.
Yeah. There's another door you can open, but is where I was. So special tactics guys, they'll employ with ODAs. Some of the white side SEAL teams use PJs and controllers. Maybe not as it's not as prevalent, so it's not a standard. But they incorporate with that, and they also do combat search and rescue for those special tactics missions. Right. I'll try not to use a bunch of acronyms, but
too late.
Yeah. So that's your entry into special tactics. So the unit that I was at was the 24th STS. And so that's our tier 1 version. And so I think that, that's where a lot of guys wanted to go back in the day. For me, it was like it was the pinnacle. That's where I needed to be if I wanted to, prove that I was, capable.
What was the name of that one again? The name of the unit?
The 24th Special Tactics Squadron.
If you see a PJ in uniform, can you tell by what could you look at a guy and be like, that guy is a rescue guy, that guy's an STS guy,
uniform-wise you could.
Yeah.
Different patches. But,
Can you tell just by looking at them?
No. It used to be back in the day, the guys that, weren't in uniform with beards and civilian clothes, you knew where they were.
Yeah.
But now there's no distinction between those.
Yeah. So from the time that you finished PJ school until you went to the 24th, how much time transpired between that?
So I was quick. So I did maybe a non-typical route there. I was in Okinawa when 9/11 happened, and I was with a good buddy of mine who, Nick McCaskill, who ended up, we were there for a typhoon party in his house. His family was on the mainland.
Only in Okinawa.
Yeah, and it's like, this is early in the morning, and we watched the World Trade Center fall, and he died years later. He got shot in the head in Afghanistan years later. And I never really connected those dots. And I was like, man, we watched this together, and who knew it was going to be such we knew it was a pivotal moment, obviously, for our nation, but on a personal level, as my friend, I never correlated those two from that moment until a few years ago. But when 9/11 happened, we were kind of pretending like we were at war in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Because it was OEFP is what they called it.
Yeah.
And everyone else was in Afghanistan. And I remember getting the Stars and Stripes over there and reading about what the guys were doing, like these ODAs that were just on the ground, you're shooting 40 Mike in these camps and then running back on horseback.
In Zamboanga and down in
so that's where I was.
Yeah.
But I was reading about these guys.
Yeah.
And I was really jealous, And so the only pathway for me 100% for sure to get to combat was to go to the 24th, because everything else was roll of dice. I could be an instructor.
Yeah.
They could say, hey, your assignment's to go to PJ school and be an instructor. Or I could go, some team that wasn't employed there. And so I applied, I put in my package to go to the 24th. And, back in the day, it was like senior guys. It was like guys that have been around for a long time. And, it was very exclusive. And so I came up there and I was 22 when I went to selection. And I remember they used to have these things called murder boards. And it was like, you did all these evaluations, and they, physically, and I was in good shape at the time. My medicine was in a decent spot. I was good at ropes, but then they bring in this board, and it's like, I think back then it was like 8 people. It was insane. And I ran assessment and selection years later, and it wasn't like this, but, and here I am, this, punk kid in there, and they're like, why you? And I'm like, honestly, there's no reason it should be me. Just to be candid with you, I don't have anything to offer you guys, but I'm hungry, I'm motivated, and I want to go to war. And, so I guess they liked my answer enough to give me a chance, but they deployed me before I even went to Green Team. They asked me if I'd deployed to Afghanistan. I just showed up from Okinawa. I didn't even have my gear. I had nothing. And they're like, we'll take care of all that. And I jumped on a plane a week later and went to war, and I was elated, man. This was, culmination of all this training, and here I am, and I didn't do anything to deployment, but it was still a great experience. Yeah.
So it was about 2 years of being in rescue before.
Yeah, about that. No, I'm sorry, it was about 3. Yeah.
Okay, and you said you did a few real world rescues before we get into the 24th Squadron and all that. Can you just pick one kind of hairy real world rescue that happened, and what the circumstance was? Well,
it wasn't hairy. I think it was significant. A lot of it was forgotten because just in the things that were going on in the world. But a U-2 pilot ejected while he's doing his flight over Korea, and so we used to do these alerts in Korea, and we weren't on alert at the time because the U-2s would fly so high they could usually glide back over the DMZ and get back. Plus they're in spacesuits because we had kind of a good lead time. At the altitudes they're flying, we know we could get to them. But
can you say how high they fly?
I don't think so. I don't think I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah. But
probably don't even know.
Yeah. Oh,
probably get it wrong if I tried to. Yeah. But so we weren't on alert. It was I think it was a Saturday morning, and we get a call like, "Hey, U-2 just ejected," and you're really excited as a PJ. And pre-war, this is the best game in town to be a PJ because you're actually doing rescues. You're doing your job, right? And so I had a pair of, fleece pants on and an old school like Gore-Tex jacket, and I jumped on the back of a helicopter and with my rifle, and we flew out, and the U-2 had crashed. A gas station was on fire.
Wow.
And here I am mucking through the the mud to get to this pilot who's in a spacesuit. Back was broken, and so here I'm out there packaging him in the Stokes litter. We hoisted him out of there, and then then was the security of the crash site, and no one really taught me this stuff.
Was this was in North Korea or South Korea?
South Korea. So he came back to South Korea and basically had to punch eventually, and so that was my first time rescuing a legitimate pilot. I'd done some pickups out of the water in Okinawa, 15 pilot would spin out, and we go pick him up. I really didn't get the experience yet, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't really a PJ yet in my mind.
Yeah.
I hadn't proved myself. Haven't proved anything to myself, and I really didn't think that I had the credibility to say I was the guy.
Yeah.
So coming to the 24th, I was like, man, I know I'll get it. I know I'll get to go to combat here.
Yeah. Real quick, you said he had a broken back. Did he ride the fucking plane in, or did he?
No, he ejected.
He ejected,
Yeah.
and still broke his back, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so they love your attitude. You go to 24th. What was it like once you came back from Afghanistan on that first pump? I know you said you didn't do anything, but at what point did you go from there to Green Team at Development Group?
So Green Team at the 24th, so we had our own.
Oh, I got you.
And so each unit has their own Green Team. And so yeah, I went to this process. It's now, it fluctuates between 8 and 12 months. And so they take you, they have PJs as controllers, right? So combat controllers, and basically teach you how to do, tier 1 soft stuff, shooting at a really high proficiency level, doing a no kidding jump trip where you're doing wall locker jumps, blacked out. The expectation is, to be on, this level, jumping MVGs. I'd never done that before because it wasn't asked. You actually weren't allowed to do it at the other units back then.
Yeah.
And, going on like a dive trip for, 3 weeks and getting back on the dragger and learning how to, do pole dives and those things. And then, touching CQB, not at the proficiency level of the other services, but so that you're not at that time, not a safety risk for anybody in the house.
You're not a liability.
The reality is that what CQB is not ingrained in like our pipelines. And so to get up to a high proficiency level to, like you said, not be a liability to the team, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, so you go through this process and graduate on the backside, and here you are, a tier 1 operator, but really still hadn't proved anything to anybody. I hadn't done anything.
Yeah. How does the selection process go from once you make it through Green Team, so that's the Air Force's Green Team.
Yeah.
Is the attrition rate high in that?
Not too bad. So selection usually weeds people out. So you do selection again, right?
Yeah.
So I've done selection years before, do it again. And once you select guys, your job now is to train them and to develop them and make them successful. And so you really don't want to attrit guys through the process.
Yeah.
We lost a few people along the process, for a myriad of different things, whether it be, safety violations, those kind of things get you fired.
Yeah.
But really at that point you're in and they want to make you successful.
And so at what point, once you graduate from the Air Force Green Team, are you selected to go to which unit? And I know you kind of went back and forth between Army and Navy that way.
Yeah, so obviously so different now than it was then, but we used to still do combat search and rescue for the task force. And so usually if you're a young PJ, you'd go do another CSAR deployment and cut your teeth before you went with the Navy. And so back then we were exclusively working with the Navy. It wasn't the Army as well. Army didn't really want PJs to integrate with them early on. A lot of old school 18 Deltas used to be there that wanted nothing to do with us. And I think that, potentially, people thought we were coming for their jobs, which we weren't. We're different. We do way more than medicine. And candidly, they're better at medicine than we are. An 18 Delta, on an SF team that's his bread and butter.
Yeah.
And so years later it changed, and I can tell you about that. But to answer your question, the PJs went with the Navy. And so it was a roll of dice, which unit you went with. My first experience going up there, after my first, I came back from a CSAR deployment, from Iraq, and I went up to Virginia Beach, and I'm like, man, it was a little bit intimidating, because you're still this young punk kid.
You're what, 23, 24?
Yeah, early 20s,
yeah.
And really, had no combat credibility. But here, these guys are the best guys, in the DoD, and I'm supposed to go in this team room and be able to survive. And from your time in the teams that there's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what this network's like. I don't know who's the top dog. I didn't know what an LPO was.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning Navy vernacular, right? I'm trying to prove myself to be competent. Got to keep my mouth shut, not piss anybody off. And some squadrons, treated the Air Force guys like crap.
Yeah.
And so through the years, there's always the squadrons that were great to the Air Force and ones that would trash them. And it's it's cyclical, right? Because it's leadership. It's what their experience was.
I mean, some of it's got to have to do with the Air Force guys too, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Some I'm sure.
Different personalities. Like,
this is what 04, 05?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of right at the start of the height of everything. So, in terms of proving yourself, I mean, did you ever get the impression that there's almost a dismissiveness, not even necessarily in a bad way, but it's like, yeah, you got to prove yourself on certain things, safety-wise and competency-wise, but because you're not one of us, so to speak, is that they kind of almost give you a pass, or was there none of that?
I don't know. So if you outshoot them on the range,
you're getting taped up.
They're not happy about that.
Did that happen?
Some of the guys we have are good shots. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, when that happens, that's when you keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
You don't smile.
Yeah.
You just go back there and keep loading mags. And but the other thing is proficiency, right? Like, can we hold our own jumping? Absolutely. You know, can we hold our own? On the physical side of what we're doing, yeah. But so now I think the biggest discriminator and being with those teams is CQB, and that's their bread and butter. That's what they live for. And so, being able to be integrated with this, this train that's moving and not be in the way. And if you're tapped to go in there, to know what you're doing, not mess things up. And guys are operating at a higher level of proficiency than I did when I first came in. They focus way more on CQB to get them at a higher proficiency level, recognizing that it's not our bread and butter. But there is an expectation, man. You're a soft guy. Yeah. And so, and especially is meaningful when you're doing like shipboard stuff, because the first time I did an underway, you're doing one-man clearances, in these cruise ships, and you got to know what you're doing, and you got to know how to find the team. You got to communicate and not get stuck in a stairwell for 2 hours because they left you there.
Were there some train wreck fucking stories of some of you guys there where it just went disastrously bad? Yeah,
we've had guys get fired from up there. Some of it's fit. Fit's really important to everybody's selection. How do they fit in the team room? We've had guys go up there and just not fit. They were sent home.
Yeah.
And so at the 24th on the backside, when you receive a guy who gets fired, now what do you do with him?
Yeah.
Do you plug him with another squadron? And so a lot of it's personality based. Some guys, and if they have a really good relationship with the troop chief or the leadership there, then probably send that guy back there, right? Yeah. And I think something that I always relayed to our young guys when they went through Green Team, when I was a leader within the unit, is that remember, you're with them, you're not a part of them. It's their tribe. We're guests there. It doesn't mean you can't kick ass and do great things and have friends up there and do all those things, but you got to remember, you're not one of them. You come back and you're part of us. Yeah. And that's a really hard dynamic for people to wrap their heads around, right? Yeah. Here I am with these guys for, pre-alert, alert, deployment, and you come home and, then I got to go back to North Carolina and, assimilate with that organization.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, on the vanilla side, like the special boat guys a little bit. Same kind of thing. Like we spend a fair bit of time with them during workup, get to know them, friends, hang out sometimes, deploy together in some instances and whatever. But ultimately, like there's still a difference between the two of them type of thing. Is it?
I think once you come to terms with that, ego is involved. And I remember thinking like, well, shoot, I'm a tier 1 guy. Like here I am. And, but then you got to recognize that this is their party and I'm grateful to be here because you're going to get on the best missions.
Yeah.
You're going to be part of the cool stuff that happens in the DoD, and you've paid your entry to get there by your competence and training, and to stay there now you need to perform.
Yeah.
And I remember there was guys that wouldn't even like acknowledge. Some guys would call me backpack because I'd be the guy with the rucksack in the hallway. Get the hell out of here. And after a few rotations, you start showing that you're competent.
Yeah.
The relationships change, and so. It takes time, though, with every organization.
Did you ever have any instances where you weren't a good fit, or you got into it with the guys, or there was any kind of pissing contest type stuff?
Yeah, I've been outspoken, and I've called things out that I didn't think were right, but not to a high level, though. I mean, also, I also respect the hierarchy and. Once I learned what an LPO was, life was a lot easier. I thought LPO was like a supply guy on the squadron. It was like a funny story where, I won't tell you who it was. You might know this person, but there was a guy within one of the squadrons. We were going to Boston. He was setting up all of the room reservations. and they called him the LPO. And I probably should just Googled it. Back then I didn't have a smartphone, but he was doing all the setup, so I figured he was the supply guy, for the squadron. Turns out he was like this pipe hitting dude.
Yeah.
And so we're in Boston, this line to check in the hotel, and I'm like, hey man, I was like, how's it going? And I introduced myself to him. I was like, so you're the supply guy for the squadron? And he just looks at me like he's gonna punch me in the teeth. And I'm like, oh man, I think I jacked that up, didn't I?
Yeah.
And so he didn't talk to me for like 2 rotations, and then the 3rd rotation, he was like, hey Chad, you're with my team. And I'm like, you know my name? Like,
You're still in supply?
Yeah, he's still a supply guy. So I saw him at a restaurant in Boston, just a separate trip later on, a few years later, and he walked by my table, and I said, hey, excuse me, waiter. And he thought it was funny, but yeah, man.
Well, yeah, for those listening, LPO is leading petty officer, which is like, one of the higher up enlisted guys within a group. So, it's usually a guy with a fair bit of experience that has the respect of all the guys, and usually. So that's a pretty polar opposite position than the supply guy, but that's funny shit. During the workups and training and things of that nature, are you involved in or integrated into every part of that? So like once you're attached to a squadron or whatever, and are you attached to a squadron or an actual troop, or is it both? Or
troops?
Okay, so like you'll be this squadron, this troop, and you stay there, for most of that, unless there's a problem.
Unless, like, let's say a PJ gets hurt, and now I don't know what it's going to turn into, because you had deployments that you were prepping for, right? You had guys that knew they were going to go to an outstation in Afghanistan and be here, and they're like, hey, do I need a PJ? No, yes. They make the decision, right?
Yeah.
Someone gets hurt during, alert. Do you have to backfill so you can kind of interchange within the troops? But a lot of times, if the troop trusts you, they want that guy back, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have to do the feeling out process. They don't want to say, is this guy competent? And also, the big ones are the jump training. Like doing the jump training with those squadrons is essential, because an off-DZ jumper on target can basically, shit can the whole mission. And so, knowing that the guys are proficient, can, get in the stack effectively, can fly their canopy the right way, can communicate, not hot mic the whole damn way down.
For those listening, that example is basically during a jump, somebody that can't fly or steer or land where they're supposed to, basically. I know
or it could be from having an emergency procedure, cutaway, and you end up by yourself. And it happens. It happens to very proficient guys.
Yeah.
But talking about not being a liability, that's one of the most dangerous, workups.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, if you don't do that workup with that troop, they're probably not inclined to bring you on, because in both, the Army and the Navy have done a ton of jumps over the past, probably in the last 10 years, they've done a ton. It seems like every op is a jump mission.
Well, and I think the HAHO stuff makes a lot of sense that way. You hear the term Halo. I don't know when that's ever been actually used.
Yeah.
It's usually the other way around for obvious reasons. But is it typically set up that way where each troop of each squadron has a PJ attached to them?
PJ and controller, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So the controller will run all the fires plans, all the aircraft assets, do the infill, exfil plans, and basically manage that chaos. The PJ is there just like a scribe for contingencies for those guys. And the guys I worked with, there would be a lot of guys that had gone through the short course, so they were corpsmen before, but once they're up there, they're just running a gun and they're assaulters. And so I knew the guys that had training as corpsmen. They weren't, carrying they would carry their personal med gear, but they weren't carrying anything else. They're carrying charges,
So is it safe to say then that the role of PJs and controllers at Dev Group and CAG is to allow all of the operators to be just shooters, and you guys are essentially providing medical and logistical support tactically so that they can not have to worry about it?
So it's different with the Army and Navy. So the Army still has 18 Deltas, and they still have those guys, and they're direct support to each squadron. And so the PJ enhances that capability, but he's not replacing that capability. Yeah. At times, maybe if there's, hey, you're the one guy that's here, you're going to do that job. But the expectation is that he's doing everything else. And so, ropes rescue, back in the day in Iraq, a lot of houses were getting, there was houseborne IDs, and so they were dropping houses when the assault force would go in. And so the PJs were the guys that were lifting those houses with lift bags and doing all the cutting and crawling under there and pulling those bodies out. And just kind of, you know, we're called the jack of all trades. You know, you see this picture, this old PJ picture. It's got like a guy with snowshoes, and he's got like, you know, he's got a scuba tank on. Yeah, the expectation is you do all those things. The reality is you can't do all those things really well. And so, you know, being focused to whatever mission area you're going into with those teams. If it's Africa and you're going to an outstation in Somalia, very different than doing a, you know, strike force deployment, you know, from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it seems like a good setup. So it sounds like on the Army side, or I guess on the Navy side, you're more of an augment or replacement medically for the corpsman or for the medical side.
So nowadays they have SARCs that are over there.
What does that stand for?
What does a SARC stand for? It's basically it's their IDCs.
Okay.
But they're you know the soft ones.
Independent duty corpsman.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they're there as well, and they're kind of like that higher end care. When you're talking about like long-term care, and if you're in a safe house, you got real sick, and we're going to be there for 3 days together. You know, who do you want? Do you want the IDC who really knows what he's doing with long-term care, and or do you want the PJ? PJ is really good at trauma medicine, right? You know, point of injury, you get shot. I'm going to take care of you, make you survive. But we're transitioning those things. It's changing. It's morphing, and training is changing. Guys are way more proficient than I was as a young man. Like their pharmacology game, like understanding how to prescribe meds the right way.
And abuse them properly.
No, I'm not saying that.
Here's how you properly abuse opioids. Actually, so I'm curious. I mean, from a loadout standpoint, is that a problem, or I mean, which
portion are you talking about?
Well, so I mean, I remember like when we deployed, our corpsman had a fucking cruise box with meds in it. Yeah. You know.
Well, guys. So my experience back in the day was that guys would tell you exactly what they wanted.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't like, hey,
so it's not,
my back hurts. It's like, hey, can you treat me? It's no, hey, I need this muscle relaxer, I need this NSAID, and I definitely need this, opioid. And you're like, hold on a second, can I at least see you first?
Yeah.
You know, it's like they were giving you their script. It's like just fill the script.
Yeah.
And then you had the Ambien days. And
I remember.
So the Ambien days, I mean, guys were taking like so much Ambien to go to sleep, and I was on, we called the A train, right? The A train for years, and it's so bad for you. So I don't touch Ambien. I won't touch it ever again.
Yeah. Did they do the Provigil counteract?
Yeah, but they had Dex back in the day, which is basically an amphetamine. And so especially in Iraq in the early days, like early 2005, 2006, where,
what is Dex short for?
I'm going to jack it up. I tell you, it's like Adderall.
Oh, okay.
And so guys were doing, 24, 36 hours, awake. And so you pop Adderall, and this is early on, right? So
sure.
This is when it was the Wild West overseas. And I remember the first time I took it, I was in the back of a helicopter. I'm like, it was like Goodwill Hunting. I was like doing advanced math equations in the back there in the air.
Fucking hanging out at MIT all of a sudden.
I was like, man, I think I could be good at physics. I was like,
telling the pilot that his fucking lift ratios are off.
That's right.
Was there I've never taken it. Is there a feeling of euphoria the same way that there is with opioids, or is it not the same?
It's different. Yeah. It's just clarity.
Oh, okay. I mean, I know that college kids abuse the shit out of it for obvious
for good
reasons,
reason too. I mean, it's
And is that shit bad? That shit's bad for you too, right?
I mean, I don't take it. Maybe I
Allegedly.
should. It'd be way smart.
That's fucking wild. I mean, just again, having been in the community as long as I was, and knowing how fucking guys are, especially on deployment, and keep in mind, there's just a different mentality when you're in an environment where, I mean, yes, you could lose your life driving home, but when you're actively seeking offensive combat, there's just a difference in terms of your mentality. I know, like when I was deployed, like we smoked a lot, which surprised a lot of people. Like we raided a fucking cigarette factory and got like a pallet of cartons of cigarettes, and they were Iraqi cigarettes, and they had like moldy green fucking tobacco. We didn't give a shit. I mean, we were smoking like 2-3 packs a day of that shit, and just didn't give a fuck, because it was like, dude, there's just a good chance I may not even fucking come home, so I don't even care. And I know that that's part of the problem mentality wise of once you live that way and it's adrenaline and fucking, chemical brain manipulations from drugs and medications and such, and then you come home and all of a sudden it's not there. None of it's there. That's hard for a lot of guys. But I also, this is a long-winded question of just saying, like, you have a loadout. Mm-hmm. You get to the point where you're out, right? And you calling back and like, hey, we need 4,000 more fucking pills of Percocet because we're totally out. Like, I mean, is that a thing?
Well, it depends where you're at. And so I've bought drugs off the local economy that I've used for partner forces.
Yeah.
And so, I'd have the drugs that I was accountable for the Americans. And then you have, maybe it's a partner force you're building up. And so, I can't use my entire supply of drugs that I have to take care of you with. So I would get stuff in the local economy for them. And it was very clearly, hey guys, don't touch this, and, I remember one time I was at a fire base in Afghanistan, a real remote one, and I was with a recce team from the Navy, and 18 Delta that was co-located with an ODA comes running over. He's like, "Hey, Chad, come, I got a bunch of casualties." So I thought they were American casualties, right? Because the ODA was getting it on this deployment, and so I grabbed my med ruck and ran over there, and it was a bunch of ANA guys, so the Afghan National Army guys, and they'd been shot up, and it was a bunch of them, but. Here my med kit is, and it's kind of like sacred to me, right? I got to be on my A game if I use this thing. I break it open.
Yeah.
And if I rip this thing apart and mess it up and we got to go to an op tonight, who's suffering? The team that actually is employing me, right? And so I put it in the corner and used the supplies that 18 Delta had for, for their guys. And I kept, those things very sacred. Yeah. And if I opened it up, it was, for an American, or if it was a partner force on target, for sure they're part of the team, but the expectation is that I'm there to do that job, and I got to knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Did you ever have uncomfortable instances where guys would be like, "Hey, I need this"? You're like, "Dude, we need to talk."
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I can imagine. I know that it's plagued.
And I mean, it's, there was a period of time there. I mean, this is all open source stuff. There was a lot of guys dealing with drug addictions.
Yeah.
And I think Adderall probably didn't help. Coming home and. Is that a gateway drug to other things? Maybe. And guys using crystal meth on the back end. This is early 2000s, and there was a lot of problems. So they cleaned a lot of that stuff up, and you're right. It put us in a weird situation where you're having to say no.
Yeah, and they're like, "Who the fuck are you to tell me?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I remember one night we were doing a jungle train up with a real small group of guys, another recce team, and. I was with the combat controller. He was setting up we're gonna do receive a team. This DZ we're setting up in the middle of the jungle. It was like a really small DZ, and so I was helping him. He's doing his comm shots in this only open area. Everyone else had the choice spots where their hammocks were hanging. If you've done any jungle time, trying to do a hammock or set your stuff up in the middle of the night is. Middle of night means the second the sun goes down, it's pitch black.
Yeah.
And I remember getting in my hammock and guys were crawling up to my hammock, like, "Hey man, get an Ambien." Asking for Ambien in the middle of the night. Or literally we laid there for an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, I didn't bring any Ambien. We're in the middle of the freaking jungle."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, how am I going to go to sleep?" I'm like, "I don't know.
Meditate.
I try hard."
Stroke one off and then meditate. All right. So, last question before I want to get into some of the combat deployment stuff. You bounce back and forth between Army and Navy. Was it just needs of the units that drove that, or was there more to it than that?
Yes, but now it's more deliberate. So guys will go there and back. So remember, we're all out at Fort Bragg, and so you're TDY away from your family if you're on alert, and so that comes at a cost to family life. For me, going up there on alert, I was dating my wife at the time. She'd come up and spend a summer with me in Virginia Beach. It was great. But kids in school back in North Carolina, you're not seeing them for a long time. So to get their, time on pillow back at Bragg, they'll flip flop. And it's good exposure. And I think that, they're way better rounded unless they're just one trick ponies. A lot of guys love being with the Navy or love being with the Army, for different reasons. I think PJs identify more with the Navy. I think the mindsets are kind of a little more similar.
Yeah.
Combat controllers are traditionally a little bit not rigid, but
a little more Army-like.
Yeah, it's probably a more natural, relationship.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the guys nowadays are crushing it with the Army. They're doing an awesome job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm assuming then from your comment about the pillow time at Bragg, then the 24th is located at Bragg also?
Yeah.
Okay. Does it fall under JSOC technically?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So obviously, 17 or 18 combat, 17.
Yeah.
So 17 deployments, we're not going to be able to outline each of them, but I would like to kind of highlight the deployments that you did, where to, and get into some of the actions on type stuff, if you're good with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So within the 17 deployments that you did, how many of them were with the Navy and how many were with the Army?
Some of them were Army and Navy.
Like you'd bounce back and forth during the actual deployment?
It was just a conglomeration of guys.
Oh, gotcha.
So I don't know. I haven't counted, but
It was a fair mix?
more Navy.
More Navy.
Yeah. But some of those also were deployments, doing combat search and rescue and those things. And so, like I said, not all of them were real sexy missions or sexy deployments. The early days of Iraq, when everyone was getting it on, I mean, those were the exciting deployments. I know that guys, like, I didn't get a chance to do any of the serious stuff, because I was a senior guy. I was, when I made E8 and E9, my life was relegated to, desk duty for the last part of my career. But
yeah. But I guess, it sounds like operationally, though, there was a pretty, 10 meaty years or so of really getting after it. To compare the two areas of operation, I know they're vastly different, generally speaking. Did you find that your deployments to Iraq or Afghanistan, one way or the other, that one was more active and you got more, kind of legitimate time working than
some of it was luck of the draw. Some of it was seasons, right? If you go to Afghanistan in the wintertime, you're probably not going to do anything. But the first big op that I went on, they cut the squadron in half. They sent half to Iraq and half stayed in Afghanistan. And we planned this really big deliberate op that we did with with a troop size, troop plus. And I'd never shot anybody at this point. And I was walking around with my chest out, like I was like one of the guys, but I'd never done that. I'd never been tested. And I'd been shot at a few times. I had no clue where it was coming from, So we did a big op, and it was, a lot of these big ops the guys do now, it's like a couple PJs, a couple controllers. And the reason I bring that up is because having a couple PJs is extra hands. It's something to bounce stuff off of with a guy. It's a split equipment, but it was just me. And so I had to hump all this stuff in. We walked about 7 hours through the mountains, and we come up to this area as ORP, and so the operational rally point. And so we're getting the ladder set and pulling everything out. And I was on a ladder team with one of the snipers. And so, here I am like an idiot. We're sneaking up, right? We're going to sneak up on this thing. Dogs start barking.
Yeah, your Pink Panther fucking crouch on.
I was ready to go, and I'll tell you how I jacked this up. But dogs start barking everywhere. And, we had some RC guys, Ranger reconnaissance guys. They went out, the two of them, and scoped the target area, the compounds. They came back, and dogs started going crazy. It started with a few dogs, and it turned into like thousands of dogs. It sounded like a dog kennel. Yeah. And I guess they could just smell us, because we obviously smelled way different. And so I grabbed the ladder like an idiot with my right hand. So
you're right-handed, I'm
probably
assuming.
See where I'm going with it. And we just start getting lit up. And here I am holding this ladder with my right hand. I can't do nothing. So I was like, I guess we're walking. Yeah. And, I bring up this to a few people, just, especially younger guys. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And all the Navy guys that I was with had this is maybe their third deployment, right? So they've already, been in big ticks, and they know how to handle themselves. They know what to do. And they all just kept going forward. And it was good for me because I was like, oh, I guess we keep going forward. I was like, oh, we're compromised. So we just hunker down here and start throwing grenades. And we press the target, set the ladder up, and then all hell breaks loose. And so, multiple compounds. I'm on one compound after, putting the ladder up, breached the door on this really small building. I mean, it's really small, and then everyone starts crashing it. And some of the guys around this target really hadn't done anything to this point, so I wasn't alone. But and recognize this is early in the war, so this is a lot of these TTPs are probably people are going to roll their eyes to them. But this small room got crashed quite a few times. Like they didn't, press in after the first banger, and so all the dirt and stuff came up in there, and guys couldn't see anything. Started going white light, and guys were deeper than me. And a guy comes out. And I didn't know whether to shoot or not because I didn't know where everybody was in this building or this room. And so I muzzle strike the guy and I drag him out of there. And everyone's just dragging people out. And it turns out there's guns everywhere once the smoke settled. So we had no clue. But as we're dragging our guys, zip tied up and moving to the main compound, and there's chaos everywhere. And the town is waking up. So the town is kind of like, okay, what's going on in our backyard? And so they start calling for a PJ, and I'm like, oh crap! And they're like, Doc, PJ. I'm like, holy crap! So I drop off my my prisoner, and I run over to the main compound, and one of the assaulters is shot through the legs, and I'm like, holy shit! So I'm like, is this whole compound secure? Is what my question is, right? And because we got snipers on ladders, you got dudes lining up all these detainees, and I'm assuming the compound's secure. And, as I breaking my medrook open, getting ready to treat, guys from the building start shooting outside the door. And I'm like, holy crap, this isn't secure. And I can't treat him here. So I drag him across the compound. And, I still haven't even started treating him yet. And so.
Was he conscious?
Yeah. And his weapon was shot. So, and he was pissed. He was telling me, do this, do that. And I'm like, I got to treat you. Just relax for a second. Put multiple tourniquets on. And, this is back before everything was standardized. This was kind of the Wild West with medical treatment, all these things. And my tourniquets are hurting him. And so this is when we used to you carried multiple pain medications. And so I gave him some, morphine first, IM, which is nowadays, people, you'd be in a lot of trouble for giving someone intermuscular morphine. I just want to get something really quick. My hands were free. And I recognize people will listen to this will say, man, why would you do? We're using ketamine now and all these cool things. I got it. This is before that time.
It's before it was all cool.
And so I can't get the bleeding to stop. And so he had been shot between his tib fib, and so he was bleeding out between there, which I later found out was compartment syndrome. And really, our guys weren't trained to treat that back then. And since then, guys are doing what they call fasciotomies. You basically cut through the muscle and let all that tissue expand. And so it doesn't cut off or create nerve damage in those things. And here I'm doing the best I can, but the compound's still unsecure. A kid got shot, and they're asking, "Hey, Chad, can you come treat this kid?" I'm like, "No, I can't." Meanwhile, another guy comes up to me, another SEAL got shot in the head, and he's like, "Chad, I got shot in the head." I'm like,
"How the fuck are you telling me that?"
I'm like, "Maybe sit down." And I take his helmet off and shot the front of his head and stuck it in the back of his helmet. And I'm like, holy crap. And I check his skull. Skull's good. I'm like, I guess keep clearing. I mean, there's nothing I can do for you. And, so he goes off, and he also sprained his ankle. So he was complaining about his sprained ankle. I'm like, you got shot in the head, man. It's like, that's a big deal. And then it just more, calamities on this target. And so I ended up breaking down one of the flags on this house, this compound, and using it as a splint because I was carrying polus litters, which are litters that are really hard to carry, but I had to go light because we're humping through the mountains. And I finally get some pain meds on. I've got the bleeding managed, but I know he's got compartment syndrome. I can feel it, how tight his calf is.
Can you explain what that is real quick?
It's so between two bones. You can bleed out in between those two bones, and you can't put pressure on it because it's between the two bones, so it protects the circulation.
So like you bleed out internally.
So you bleed inside those big cavities, and if you don't cut that fascia open and let it kind of expand out, it basically becomes a tourniquet internal, to you. And so, like I said, it'll create tissue death, nerve damage, all those things. And so. I'm like, man, he just got to get to the cache and they need to do surgery on him. And so, and meanwhile, the city is kind of coming. It kind of seemed like in the few snapshots of down these alleyways you'd see, kind of seemed like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, folks coming down. And the controller, we had, one cast asset, AC-130, and he's calling 40 millimeter, holding him back with it. And he hasn't gone, lethal with any of his rounds yet, but he's just doing warning rounds. And here we have this 47 inbound come across the, the area we're at, and they're all hyped up, right? And so I've got casualties, multiple casualties, and they came in very close to putting that thing down on top of us.
Wow.
'Cause I remember laying on top of this guy, trying to hold him off the rotor wash mostly, but I was like, holy crap, this thing's going to crush us. And get on the back of that, we take him back. But this was the first moment that I had where I knew this compound's shooting at us. I knew what I was supposed to do because of the people around me. And so you're learning the moment. But candidly, man, like I wasn't good at this point. This is still me learning and in my development in 2004. And so now I'm starting to realize, okay, if they shoot at me, I can shoot back, right? I'm not going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I also starting to realize, hey, what do I need to carry? And this turned into a mass casualty for me by myself. And so how do I need to, prepare for this? And so it was probably one of the biggest lessons learned for me. And so the subsequent deployments, when the shooting started, was a lot easier for me. I'm like, okay, I know what I'm able to do. I know how to maneuver with these guys now. And it's really hard to teach that in training.
Yeah.
I thought I knew.
Yeah.
Candidly, I did. I thought I was better than I was.
Yeah, no, I remember the very first time we did something real world, and the difference between what the action's on when it was real, clearing rooms, versus everything I'd done in training for years up to that point was vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
Vastly different. It was way faster. It was a lot sloppier, and it was just super dynamic and fucking chaotic. But the principles remained largely the same. But it was a huge learning curve, as well. Going back to that first kind of interaction, you had the two casualties that you talked about. Were there more than that?
Yeah, so some other people had bumps and bruises. A lot on that target. A few people, fell off some high places, and a broken nose here and this and that. But those are the two guys that were shot.
Yeah.
And but then I started to realize that, especially in these mud huts and like in those places, part of the world, guys will fall through the roof and they can break their legs, and so you got to be ready for all that crap. Now, not just gunshot wounds, and so. But yeah, the long-winded answer of saying yes, those are only two
like serious.
Wounds,
yeah. Is there a point at which, and maybe it's more standardized now, or I'm assuming it is than it was then, but is there at this point, casualty number-wise, where now I need one of the corpsmen, if there are? I mean, I'm assuming there's backup corpsmen or something. Like, is there a point at which, hey, I need fucking so-and-so to come help because there's that many dudes?
I think on that target, I think subsequent missions and deployments, yes. On that one, there was a lot of shooting going on that target.
Yeah.
And I think everyone was just kind of, going Wayne Grove and getting it on. And it's not really a sexy thing to be treating a casualty covered in blood, and it's not where guys want to be. But what I started to realize is that all eyes are on you though when you're treating, and especially if it's another team guy, and it's like, hey, fix it.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother level of stress in a combat environment. You're already you're nervous about what's going to happen in this op and all those things, but now it's like you got to perform and everyone's watching everything you do.
That's like being in a really tight parking lot. Everybody's watching you trying to back into something.
Yeah.
But times 5,000, right? Do you know about how many enemy personnel were on that target, roughly? I know it's probably seemed like fucking 1,000, but
so they said 30.
30.
That's what they said.
And how many?
I don't know if that was accurate though, because when you debrief, that's the funny thing about that debrief. When you start tallying up all the numbers of everybody, killed this many people, and you're like, man, there's like 150 people there that night. There's probably like 6.
Yeah. So ultimately, was the mission considered successful?
Yeah, it was disruptive.
Yeah. All right, so. You learned a lot on that. Now you kind of have a little more feeling of being emboldened in terms of being offensive. What was the first operation like where you actually felt like a shooter?
Felt like a shooter?
Well, or got some.
So
offensively.
So next deployment, went back out. I was back in Afghanistan, and I remember. We were compromised like every night we went out. We made a target a handful of times, and I remember the first time I was by myself, being independent and making a decision, was a guy walking around a building, with an AK, and he can't see us, and I'm in a poppy field. So all the opium farmers down there, and these beautiful poppy fields are in the daytime, pitch black. He didn't see us. We've got ISR. We know how many people are in this compound, and here I am getting to make the decision. Yeah, that's a legit shoot. And so, but I remember, shooting 4 or 5 times, and this guy didn't drop. And when you're with different units prefer different ammo. And I think this deployment, I wasn't using something fancy. I was using green tip, and all those rounds were just punching through them. And so eventually I took a knee in this poppy field and relaxed my laser and engaged him. But that was the first time I felt competent, right? I was like, I know this is what I'm supposed to do right now.
Yeah.
But it also, I would see guys make really good decisions, and senior guys that were like, hey man, this is where I have to maneuver to, and they go by themselves and just do really heroic stuff that, empowers you to kind of have that same confidence. And so I was talking with the guys from the One's Ready podcast recently, and we're talking about how do you provide these lessons learned to the next generation of guys, because a lot of it has to be done experientially, right? You have to learn it through that kind of that real experience. And I think that's going to be lost, with a lot of the, senior guys getting out and moving on. Not a lot of war going around right now, at least in the near term. Yeah. And so what does that mean for that confidence? Because you really don't want to be the first guy to shoot, and especially not as an Air Force guy, because you're going to take a lot of crap if you get it wrong.
Were there ever times where you were the first guy to pop off rounds as the Air Force guy?
Not me personally, no.
Yeah. When you say you relaxed your laser, do you mean you focused in on a headshot for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a couple comments in every combat vet that I have on, if we start talking about ticks or gunfights, that they hear me bitch about green tip. So I'm not going to bitch about it, but yeah.
It's got a place, right?
Well, I don't know where it is.
Maybe shooting through car doors.
Yeah, even then I'd probably still pick something else, but
so I'm not a ballistics guy, right? And so if the smart guys that geek out on ballistics tell me this is what we're carrying, and it was like 70 grains Black Hill for years, or 77 grain, and it was like I didn't even know what the hell grain was. I was like, is that weight? And, but
well, it's not overly complicated. I'm certainly not a ballistics specialist, but the common formula of grain weight and speed is essentially what dictates the amount of energy that's dumped into the target, which translates to damage. Now, yes, whether it's a hollow point or not, or ball or green tip or what have you, is going to largely determine if it's being shot through something before it hits soft tissue. Can have a significant impact. For me, in most working environments, especially if you have snipers with you, this is just my take, and I'm sure there's a million guys that would disagree with me, but I think the lower grain 300 blackout, like the 124 grain 300 blackout, is a really good kind of jack of all trades round that can still handle business. You can reach out long enough. To me, like even with 5.56 green tip, like you're not going to be taking 600-700 yard shots with it anyway. So
that's what people, it's funny to hear people talk about, these long shots. Long shots rarely happen.
Yeah.
They happen, the guys in Syria were reaching out and touching people, but, and I know snipers have taken, significant shots, but really it's all usually close in.
Yeah.
And I started carrying an MP7 once we got those, and because I wasn't the primary shooter, right?
Yeah.
And guys would give me hell all the time, like, you're not going to kill anybody with that, but I know plenty of people that have killed a lot of people with that MP7.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for me, caliber-wise, there's always a debate, almost from a dick measuring contest standpoint of, stopping power, quote unquote, and especially with handguns, guys like 45s or 44s or 357 Magnums or whatever, because of quote unquote stopping power. But the reality of it is, especially with handguns, with all of those rounds, if you're hitting somebody where they need to be hit, caliber doesn't matter.
Yeah.
On the transverse, if you're not hitting them where they need to be hit, caliber doesn't fucking matter. So I mean, I'd rather have a fucking 22 and pinprick somebody between their eyes with it, and have 300 rounds that weighs a half a pound, than to carry some monster fucking caliber. Having said that, the limb shots, I think, in a combat environment, if they're significant enough, that's where a little more grain weight than 55 to 77 is my preference. I mean, because again, 124 grain is is double that. So, but it's still moving out of that platform fast enough to punch through shit and do damage if it's the right round, like if it's a buffalo boar round or Black Hills or even Hornady makes some pretty good shit. But
so I had a catastrophic failure with my 416.
Really? Yeah.
And I stopped carrying a pistol because they said that gun was so reliable. You never had to clean it. All we heard, and armorers never said this, but they're like, "Oh, we never have to clean these guns. That's perfect." And so I stopped carrying that Glock. And so one deployment, I had jumped into this ditch, and the ditch is like a mixture of like mud and feces, I'm sure. But I was shooting above an embankment, and so the PK from the partner force was like ripping next to me, which I'm like, get the hell away from me, because just drawing all that fire towards where I was at, and I'm shooting out in my second mag, and I'm going old school, like putting the mags in my shirt, like I was taught when I was at PJ school back in the day. But my weapon goes down, and so I'm kind of tweaked up, and so I hit the forward assist like an idiot. I just make sure the mag was seated, and I hit the forward assist. Nothing. I'm like, what the hell? And so I rip the mag out, put another mag in, rack another round. I can't rack a round in there. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And so we pull back. The controller's going to drop the house. And so he's like, we're going to blow it. We're going to go back to the vehicles. And so we're bounding back. I can't shoot. And, the partner force is bounding with us. And so back in the day, you used to carry these titanium bore punches.
Yeah.
So everyone had one. So I pulled this thing out, and I could see a round stuck in the chamber. So I'm like trying to bang this thing out with this titanium bore punch. It won't move it.
Wow.
And I'm like, holy crap. And so we get back in the vehicles and the Hiluxes, and we got to drive back to this bad part of town. And I'm in the back there smashing the bore punch with a magazine. I can't get to move.
Holy fuck.
And I'm looking in there, and I'm like, it's an expender. You can see it, it's been struck. And so I'm like, holy crap. So I grabbed the thermobaric laws, and I started putting them down. I was like, at least we get a tick. I'll shoot something. I'll contribute in some meaningful way.
Shooting a fucking rocket.
Well, I get back to the house we're living at, and I get the metal bore punch and a sledgehammer, and I get the round out. And apparently it was a bad lot of ammo, and so the extractor couldn't grab it, but it was so heated up. My barrel was so heated up when I forward assist, it jammed in there so tight.
Wow.
And so that was a scary moment. But
Dude, that's it is fucking wild. How long was it jammed while you were, how long time-wise were you fucked with that being jammed?
It seemed like a really long time. It was probably like maybe 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
It seems like an eternity when you're in tech and you're not.
When you're getting shot at and you can't shoot back, it seems like forever.
Yeah, you got a PK ripping next to your head.
Yeah, no shit. What was a typical loadout for you?
As the PJ?
Yeah. I mean,
so I tried to go super light, and I realized I wasn't the primary guy. So back in the day, I used to carry so many mags, like when I was a rescue squadron PJ.
Fucking 10 mags.
Oh yeah, for sure, 7 mags.
Yeah.
It was what the loadout was. I went down to 3 mags in my chest and 1 in the rifle. But when we went to MP7s, I was going super light.
Yeah.
Because I was already heavy. I already have a ruck on. So wherever I could cut weight. I did carry one of those little baby Belgians. You ever seen those teeny little ones? I
don't think so.
It was like I was in this. I can't tell you whose room it was, but it was like this loadout room of one of the partners we work with, and they had all these kind of like exquisite capabilities in there. So I'm like, oh, look at these frags, small frags.
Oh yeah,
I keep them in my pocket.
The little mini grenades.
So I was downtown Kabul in this rotation. I was wearing Carhartts every day, and I had this grenade in my pocket. So at the end of the deployment, I'd never thrown one before. I went to the range with the guys, and I take it off and like throw it. It's like,
that's a fucking dud.
it wouldn't have killed anybody.
Yeah, that's fucking funny.
False sense of security.
Yeah. Well, maybe distract them enough.
Yeah,
It's like a 9-banger maybe. That's fucking funny. All right, so going through these deployments, I'd love to hear, maybe a couple stories of where you really put your medical expertise to use, where kind of similar to the first one, but similarly hairy issues where guys are taking legit heavies and you're having to do the traditional PJ mission, as well as maybe somewhere where you got involved more from a shooter standpoint.
Yeah, so most of it was partner force being really messed up, and I had the good fortune in a lot of my deployments that we didn't take a lot of U.S. casualties. I know some guys had different experiences, but my time in Somalia, mass casualties with those guys, and at this point, I felt confident in my skills, and those guys got chewed up pretty good, and had a mass casualty. We brought them all back to our safe house, and and it's like a shower floor, the tile that they put down. It's just blood everywhere. And running through it very methodically, like doing triage and saying, okay, you're the guy I can save. I'm gonna put my effort towards you. Had lots of limbs just mangled. I had more hand injuries with Somalis that were shooting themselves or getting shot in the foot. I mean, just things that were like borderline amputation. That was then kind of teetered from trauma to actual, no kidding, let's prevent infection, let's sew you up and get a drain there.
Did you say Somalis?
Yeah. Our partner force Somalis, though, the good Somalis. And, the Somalis are cool people too, man. They're resilient too. Like I had a guy get his head run over. We're doing vehicle IADs and in the rocks, he got his head run over. And I'm like, oh, his brain's gonna be out. And I didn't have any gloves. And I was kind of stressing that I was going to get blood all over me. And so I run over there, and he's sitting there bleeding from his skull, and he's just smiling.
Holy fuck.
And I don't know if he was just out of it, but I'm like, okay. And we're going to put you back together as best we can.
Oh, like, fuck. But do you have any idea what happened to him?
He got run over by the truck.
I mean, after that, like, did he survive?
Yeah. So he survived.
Yeah.
All these guys would survive. I had guys.
Now he's teaching fucking tactics, probably.
You know what's funny about the Somalis is that I don't know if it's our immune systems are just like we're so fragile because of antibiotics. But these guys, like I said, all these guys would get shot, shoot themselves in the hand with the Glocks they were playing with. And I sutured this guy's hand up, and you could see his tendons, you could see everything moving, kind of like Terminator. And I sutured him up, I probably put 40, 50 stitches in there. Get it cleaned up, he can still move his fingers, but I'm anticipating cutting his hand off. I was like, there's no way this is not going to get infected. You don't have sanitation, they're not taking showers. And so I called the hand surgeon back at Womack, back at Bragg, and said, hey, what do I do here? Show him the pictures. He's like, that's what I would do. Just watch it. He goes, if it gets infected, chop it off here. And so I am fully anticipating doing an amputation on this guy's hand. And I would make him come to me every morning to take the antibiotics. I didn't think he would take them. He'd probably sell them or something. And he healed in like a week and a half.
Holy fuck.
And,
I'm sure it is.
If this happened to you or me, we'd have to chop our arm off.
No, I have no doubt that growing up that way, their immune systems are incredibly resilient because they're just surrounded by it all the time. It's a strange irony that way. I think that we think that we're. I think there's a happy medium. I'm not saying don't ever wash your hands, but we for sure take it overboard, and I think to our society's detriment that way. Have you had to amputate something before?
Yes.
Yeah. What was it?
Hand.
Hand.
Yeah.
More than one, or
no? Just one.
How did you go about doing it? Was it like in the field, basically, or
in a house?
Yeah.
So just create a flap on there. Once you cut through the bones, you're not actually breaking bones like another limb. We carry bone saws in our bags, and so if it's a long bone, you can cut it off. But you cut through the metacarpals, and you basically make you try to make a little fat pad on there if you have more tissue. But you just wrap the skin back over and suture it up.
What did you knock him all the way out to do that?
No.
No shit.
Yeah. So nerve block, and then a ton of local anesthetic. So guys now can consciously sedate people. They can do a lot of procedures, and ketamine is a really powerful drug that they're using in the field really successfully.
Yeah.
But no.
You ever hypnotize anybody?
I'm just with the watch?
Yeah. Just don't pay attention to me cutting your hand off. Could he not feel any of it?
No, he's pretty stoic through it all.
Yeah.
my experience with those, partners, they were extremely tough and resilient. I look at, when I get, if I stub my toe, what I feel like I'm going through, I feel like I need like therapy afterwards. But these guys are, getting shot multiple times, throughout the year. Some by themselves or their teammates.
Fuck. All right, so you went to Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, anywhere else that you can mention?
I spent a lot of time in Yemen. And Yemen was interesting because I had been out there a few times, and it's my second deployment, I think, back, and we were the QRF for something that was going on, and we were in a low-vis vehicle. But to back up, before we went out, I was leaving the house with a thin-skin vehicle. And it's kind of mundane. It was like a shakeout op, I guess is what you call it. And one of the guys was coming up the stairs in the house, and he's like, "Hey, Chad, do you want the Land Cruiser?" And my only question was, is it gassed? Because if it's not gassed, I don't want it. I'll just take the vehicle I got because I know the tires are good. I know, I've prepped it. I got toe straps in there. I got everything I need. And he says, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Okay." So we exchange keys on the way down the stairs, and we go out to this spot, and we're waiting. As the QRF or, response, whatever you want to call it, even kind of like pseudo C2. And this cab pulls up behind the quarter pounder. So I'm driving, and I'm sitting there, and I'm telling the crew in the car, I'm like, "Hey, man, there's 2 people in this cab." And everyone's like, "Yeah, whatever." And so I didn't think it was a car bomb because there was 2 people. And guy gets out, and he looks at the back of the car. And I said, like, "Hey, he's coming around the car." He walks up to the window and punches 3 rounds point blank in our window. And so I get it into gear and pull out because I think it's an ambush. I figure something else is coming next.
Do you guys have armored or fucking bulletproof glass?
Yeah, they're bulletproof windows. And so
this is in Yemen.
Yeah. And so but when you look at the window, I got a picture of it. Like he came pretty close to punching through that thing point blank.
Yeah.
And so here I'm splitting lanes, trying to get out, get off the X, and I assumed there was more to come. And, trying to get everyone getting guns out and like get ready for what's, if we get blocked ahead, maybe it's a roadblock. But that was, day 2 in country, and a few of us stayed behind. They, evac a lot of people out because it basically was open season because Al-Qaeda hadn't offensively done that to an American in that region. We're kind of like off limits.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a gentleman's agreement, I guess. But then it was kind of an inflection point, like, okay, they're not messing around.
So that was AQAP guys, not Houthi rebels?
No, AQAP.
Wow.
So the Houthis hadn't moved down yet. The Houthis are still up north. This is pre-Civil War.
Okay. That's fucking interesting. Can you talk at all about what you guys were doing there, or is that...
We were just trying to find bad guys.
Yeah. Is there one spot that you spent more time than the rest, or was it pretty even between those 4?
It was actually pretty even. I felt like, my time in Yemen, since it was later on, leading up to a deployment, to try to get back into Libya, that was later on too. But I spent, a lot of time thinking about Yemen and being maybe more in tune with geopolitics because I was a little bit older at this point. I was reading more. I was kind of soaking up the news and the history of the area. And so I think I was more emotionally attached to my time in Yemen than anywhere else, personally.
Yeah.
I regret not being more in tune with what was going on in Afghanistan when I was there.
Yeah.
But in Afghanistan, you came back to you had your fire pit after an op and, you're drinking beers and hanging out and kind of playing PlayStation most of the time.
Living the rough life.
Yeah.
It sounds like maybe it was Yemen from what you just said, but was there one of those AOs that stuck out as being the busiest in terms of the operations you guys were doing?
Iraq, back in the early days. Yeah. Especially, so the Army cornered the market on Iraq in the early days. And so the Navy had Afghanistan. And you probably heard the term Baghdad SWAT before. And they were doing, 5-6 targets a night. And they would kick down this door, do their battlefield interrogation, go to the next target, and next target, and next target. And some of those squadrons would leave with, 100+ ops in a deployment. And then, you fast forward to go to guys do 1 op in a whole deployment. So, yeah, it changed over the years, for sure.
Yeah. Was there any element other than your kind of reflection on Yemen that you got kind of a, I guess, just an idea or a sense from the guys that there was any questioning as to why you were where you were at doing what you were doing?
As far as like the locals, or
no, the team.
I'm not sure I understand. Like you're saying for the PJ's role?
No, for just generally speaking, the units that you were with. Yeah. Did you, like, big picture wise, did you ever get the sense that there was ever any sentiment of what the fuck are we doing here? Like, why are we here and why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah, I think, yeah, especially if it's not like a fruitful deployment, because guys generally want to, they want to do their job. You want to go on ops. You want to go be productive. So I think that comes out for sure when the lulls in the action happen. In the early days of Somalia, you didn't have a lot of authorities, right? And so that changed later on. Yemen was the same way. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? And I think that, Afghanistan, guys had that, during some of the lulls in Afghanistan as well. So absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the age thing, because for me, the same thing. I mean, I was in Iraq in my 20s and I mean, I got out when I turned 30. So during that time, like, that never really crossed my mind, and by what are we doing here? I don't mean we're not doing what we're trained to do, so why are we here? I mean more from like the political, geopolitical big picture standpoint, like as a nation, why do we have a presence here, and should we?
Yeah, you had to kind of be careful about sharing those sentiments, especially back in the day. I kind of felt that about Iraq in the early days, because I was like, I have no problem, going out on these targets and doing, offensive things. But I also kind of recognized that if they came to my town,
I'd be one of them.
I'd be one of them. That's what I said. And, I think guys, and generally the crew in special operations is more mature and maybe more better, well-read. So they're guys that usually think about things like this. But I don't know that back in the day that was really espoused. It was more kind of a feeling.
Kept it to yourself. Yeah. And I think, for the ability to do that job as competently as you can, there's a certain element of needing to suppress that a little bit, I think. If you've got a significant population of your fighting force questioning why they're there, that's not going to augment your your capability at all, so I always looked at it, like, hey, it doesn't really matter what I think, when bullets are flying and it's actions at the objective, none of it fucking matters anyway, so, but I know, like, now that I, being somebody in my 40s and paying a lot of attention to policies and international agreements and conflicts and things like that, I definitely pay way more attention, as well as am much more suspicious of everything, frankly. But do you have a craziest injury that you treated story that pops to mind?
I'll bring up dog handler stuff.
Awesome.
Dogs.
Yeah, but, that's next on the list. This canine bite treatment.
There was the Rangers had contract dog guys for a while.
They weren't
like battalion guys. They were a contract company that they would brought on.
So, really? Like civilian contractor fucking dog guys?
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah, in the early days.
Wow.
And so we were they had like a mount site at Bagram that we were going to use for a train up for a target they were looking at. And so this dog handler for the Rangers volunteered to be a role player while we were going to, do this FMP. And so the dog handler, sent the dog in, and the contractor was in the back room, and I guess he didn't put his arm out in the right spot, and the dog latched onto his neck.
Fuck.
And ripped his ear off.
Holy shit.
And so his ear's hanging. I mean, it wasn't completely ripped off, but so we didn't know he's back there, though. Right? So this dog's latched on, and so everyone's doing their clearance, And
it's on his neck, so he can't even scream.
He's just there in agony. And, they end up using the e-collar and getting him off. And so then I'm like, damn it. Of course, this is supposed to be like an easy, rehearsal. And so I'm like, how do I get his ear back on him? And so we go down together to the cache, and one of the surgeons there, him and I super glued his ear back on. It was pretty gruesome.
Fuck. Was there significant damage to his neck?
No, it was mostly just the ear. So it ripped the ear down, like kind of like peeled like a banana.
Wow. Fucking Christ. You had dogs with you most deployments. Do you remember their names? Can you say them? Can you say what squadron you were with or no?
Yeah, it was with Gold Squadron for the most part, but I did time with, all the squadron would do an op with these guys, do an op with these guys. But I forget the dog's name back then. I think it was like Diesel or something like that. Yeah. Some cool name, It wasn't like...
Yeah, it wasn't Princess or...
But I remember, so one of my first experience with dogs was, so we were doing underways, and so I was with the team that was going to faster up to the deck. So you wanted to be on the half if you're doing underway because the BAF sucks and it's dangerous. Half is super chill. You get to, load up from Virginia Beach, fly out and do your thing. And they had a brand new dog and beautiful, I guess it was like a mix, Dutch, Malinois. And the dog's clearing, and one of the role players shot it in the eye with a sim round. And so basically this is a brand new dog that was obsolete, and they had to give it to, and I didn't realize how much those dogs cost at the time. Yeah. And I was like, holy crap, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then to take a dog off the line,
yeah,
it was kind of my first exposure to what a precious asset these things were.
Yeah. Did they fuck that guy up for doing it? Yeah.
And these are like Navy guys, right? So the Navy role players. And that was another thing I'd never seen before. I was like, the CMC was an intimidating guy. And dude, they didn't mess around.
Yeah.
If these role players got out of line, they tuned them up. I'd never seen this stuff before. I was like, damn, man.
Yeah. Can you describe the ruckus? Can you say what happened?
Talk to him. I'll tell you offline.
Fuck. That's awesome. I mean, it sucks to hear about the dog, but it's nice to hear that there's still old school accountability for making mistakes, because that shit is effective.
I mean, watching somebody get hip tossed in the middle of a bunch of people, I'm like, damn, man. I was like, don't mess up.
Yeah.
That's another thing about LPOs. I didn't realize LPOs would tune their own guys up too.
Yeah, I know it. I mean, I remember. I mean, to me, that's one big component I think that's largely missing from our society, and even our military has turned into that in a big way. Where back, my time at the SEAL teams. I mean, if you fucked up, it was like the dudes would drag your ass out behind, a Connex box or behind the berm, or just drag you into the office and just beat the fucking shit out of you. Yeah. They'd tape you up, they'd fucking electrocute you. I mean, they'd pour fucking Tabasco down your ass crack or dump it all over your nuts. I mean, they'd fucking half drown your ass. Yeah, I mean, like it was a legit ass beating, if you fucked up. And I think, that either fixes you or you go away, if you have a problem. But it's one of those things where, I can pinpoint both from myself and every instance that I ever saw things like that take place with other guys that I knew well. And I can tell you that shit never happened again. There was no, this is the third time you've had this. There was none of that. Being able to police your own in a manner with which your own comes up with and deems effective to remedy the problem is how I think all life should be lived. Frankly, I think that's an important part of learning things. But
so imagine being an Air Force guy.
No, I can't even
seeing that for the first time. You're like, oh man, this is intense.
In Iraq we had a CCT guy with us. It was a fucking awesome dude and a lifesaver, literally. I mean, there was a couple times where he had shit on station fucking ASAP, and he was an amazing fucking guy. Were there any good bite stories of any ops that you were on any of your deployments?
Not stuff I want to tell. I mean, how gruesome those dogs, those bites can get on people, and I mean, those dogs are killers, man.
Yeah.
That's.
I guess anyone that you could share with a dog, like no shit saved your guys' ass.
Not for ops I was on. I mean, they were always, integrally there, and the dogs were so important for call outs, escalation of force and the dogs in. And then, as technology started to develop, putting cameras on dogs and getting that feedback. But, not really for me, in my experience. I was always kind of scared of the dogs, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I didn't have a whole lot of experience around them. And the first time I put on the bite suit when the dog handlers at Bath. I didn't realize how strong that bite was.
Yeah.
And so when those dogs would be in the house and everyone's, doing work, and the dog comes, patrolling through looking for work too, I'm like, don't bite on me. Because the guys would get bit by dogs.
No, I know it.
I remember one of the, I guess maybe he was a troop chief at the time. Maybe he eventually became the CMC, but he was getting bit by dogs all the time. Our dogs on target, and I don't know what it was about him.
He had begging strips smeared all over his nuts.
Yeah, he got bit kind of a ladder, and I remember we got compromised because he started shooting at the dog and missing. It was kind of funny.
Jesus.
Just point blank shooting at this dog, and dog dancing.
And it was one of your guys' dogs?
No, it was obviously a local. They wouldn't shot a work dog. No.
I mean, fuck, I've seen some cops shoot their own dogs because they're getting that fucked up by them and can't keep them from,
No, I've never seen anything like that.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's normal or happens all the time, but it's damn sure happened. I know you don't want to get into it. I'm going to ask you again, though, just because, with the dog stuff, is there one good dog bite story you can share?
Yeah, I guess what I'm alluding to is that those dogs can really do some damage, and
worst place somebody's been bit that you've seen.
Well, I'm saying like bodies, and those dogs are, when they're in that mode, I mean, there's not much going to stop them. So, and a lot of that happened in Iraq in the early days. And, seeing that is pretty significant, man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, for sure. I mean, fuck, I've been bitten a number of times. I've had bones broken by them. They're legit, and it always makes me laugh, I guess, when people who have no idea or concept of how capable they really are, and they're like, well, I'll give him this arm and fucking choke him with this other one, or I'll jam my hand down his throat or whatever. And it's like, to me, that's akin to saying that, here's this power tool, here's a skill saw, and I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to grab the blade and stop it. It's that ridiculous to say that you're going to use your hand to defeat a dog's mouth, when it's one that's been bred, raised, and trained for that type of work and is very capable. And just like with people, there's some dogs that are absolute fucking killers, and then there's some that barely meet the minimum standard, and so there's calibers in dogs the same way, but any of them that pass all of the kind of initial screening and evaluation to make it to that point are pretty substantial fucking animals.
I always thought that would be a cool gig. I'm, up at the beach, a lot of the dog handlers were prior squadron guys, right? And they're like transitioning over to being dog handlers. It's a pretty cool gig. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, if I was in a position to cross over that'd be a pretty fun job. Yeah. Because they weren't SEALs before. You had some old crusty SEALs that were dog handlers, and some guys were, guys who had trained to be a dog handler, but they weren't team guys. But then when you had team guys as dog handlers, they're basically dual purpose,
It's especially there, I think, the way that they're organized and kind of the logistics flexibility that they have there to have as many dogs and handlers per squadron that they do is how it should be done, because they work at such a higher level than everybody else, I think. But so you spent a lot of time at Gold, you said?
Yeah.
Obviously, or I'm assuming that you weren't there during Extortion 17, or were you?
So I was flying to Yemen shortly thereafter, and so when Extortion happened, we had 3 Air Force guys in there, and so Dan Zerbe was a buddy of mine, and so I went to as many funerals as I could go to before I had to deploy, and I was in a different AO. The guys that backfilled went out there to kind of backfill all those positions to try to keep it, keep momentum in Afghanistan. That was pretty heavy for those guys. Yeah. But I had, Rob Reeves, was one of the dudes on Extortion. Him and his crew of guys were the younger guys when I first got to, work with the Navy. The nicest guy on the planet. But I had known a lot of those guys, and I just got back from deployment with Jonas Kelsaw, who was OIC, a couple of rotations before, in doing time in Somalia with him. So I knew those guys pretty well, and And if you think about it, I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with my Air Force guys, my teammates, because I was, with a controller or with a couple other PJs and a couple controllers, but you're with the Navy guys nonstop.
Yeah.
And so that was a really impactful time for obvious reasons. But yeah, that was hard to fathom. And it was pretty cool to see leadership though from the beach that, they had their hands full and they still made time to make sure they're at the Air Force guys' memorials and funerals. And that was an endurance event for everybody involved to make that happen for families. And that was a really crazy time.
Yeah. What impact did that have on you personally, when you heard it? Obviously it's a kick in the nuts, but, was there ever a, holy fuck, that could have been just as easily been me. Did it shake you that way at all?
I've always been really good at compartmentalizing things, maybe to a fault.
Your wife loves that, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe she does. But even with that, it was like, okay, it happened over there. It's not real to me. For the guys that are out there, devastating. And I was always able to separate those things. A buddy of mine, Scott Duffman, died in Afghanistan in a 47 crash. And it just never felt real to me. I just felt like he was still deployed. I always kind of rationalized things that way. I was in Iraq in 2004, I think, and a British C-130 got shot down. It was daytime. It wasn't my responsibility. And they said, hey, can you guys go get these bodies back and secure it? I said, yeah. So we jumped on Super Pumas, so Brit Super Pumas, and we went out there in the middle of the daytime just north of Baghdad and secured a really, really gruesome crash site. And my team was, bringing back appendages and torsos. And for my mind, it was just business. It was like, just get this done. Accountability. That's what we're here to do. Get all the weapons, get all as many bodies. We're going to get every body, but try to you dignify these bodies the best we can, and then get out of here. We ended up being on the ground for about 3 days.
Holy fuck.
We ended up linking up with some Marines. They secured the perimeter for us, but we were vulnerable for a long time just north of Baghdad. And the SAS showed up because it was their bird. And so the reason I'm telling you this is when we got back from that, that operation, I was a young team leader. I was a team leader on the ground, and I didn't know how to take care of my guys. I didn't know what they were going through because it didn't affect me. And I was just really good at saying, okay, this is work. It's not, it's not real, I guess, or the best way to contextualize it. And I remember the chaplain came to our door, and he's like, hey, you guys need to sit down with us. I'm like, why would we do that? And I didn't even think anything of it. This is before, we talked about like mental health and some of these other kind of bigger issues. Yeah. And I turned them away, and I didn't think about my guys, how that was affecting them. And, but since that point, I was always really good at, putting things in a box and saying it's over here. It's not, you don't touch that. And it's a survival mechanism for a lot of guys. Yeah. And it continues to be, I guess.
Yeah, I'm very much that same way, but I don't know if it's a wiring thing or an experience thing. That's what works, and so that's what people go with. I don't know, but it's interesting in these environments, the disparity guy to guy with how they deal with and process things and move on or not, or what have you.
And it's hard as a leader to not put your experiences on them. Like they're processing things differently. And,
sure.
I remember you'd have guys that would get really shook after, a couple deployments, and, does it take 10 deployments to kind of rattle your cage? I don't know. And so when I became a senior leader and taking care of my guys, I was like, man, I got to respect the fact that guy's in this moment right now, and you got to care for that. He's different than you. And I don't think that's being soft on dudes. I think it's being a
good leader,
emotionally intelligent and available.
No, I think it's being a good leader, because I think it's the same way with kids. It's, a coach with their athletes, a student or a teacher with their students, parents, with their kids. I mean, you name it. I think it's all pretty paralleled that way, where it doesn't really matter what you think or how you perceive something. It's how they perceive it, right. And it's enormously so that way with dog training. I mean, that's all of it, like especially so there, because they think differently and associate things differently than we do. And so you really have to be cognizant of that. And it's hard. I mean, I know it's hard for me sometimes with my kids or family members or whatever, of thinking like, God, it's a big fucking deal, or, you know, something that I think is a big deal, they don't, vice versa, whatever. But you said it was a C-130. It got shot down.
Yeah.
No shit. Like small arms, or it was.
So they didn't really determine what SAM it was. They thought it was like some makeshift SAM.
Oh, okay.
But the Brits didn't have a whole lot of C-130s at the time.
Yeah.
And this crash site was strewn like, close to a mile.
How many people were on board?
There was 8.
8.
I remember correctly. And, you know, that was, there was a stream that was on fire because the JPA was on fire, and I had my guys get in their dry suits, wintertime in Iraq, with a tether and get under them and pull bodies up from the mud. My team of guys did an awesome job. And I had some Rangers out there, and this is before all the Rangers had radios. You know, some of them did, some of them didn't, and they're on these perimeters by themselves. And it was a pretty gruesome scene.
Yeah, fuck, man. So now, you know, as you kind of go through these deployments in all those 4 areas, would you say, you know, other than the area of operations, the mission was generally pretty similar, just basically out doing raids, looking for bad guys type stuff? Yes and no.
So I transitioned, to doing some of the low vis stuff for a while. Had a chance to be on the Captain Phillips mission, with a few guys. I jump mastered the team that went in early.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so there's a handful there was 3 Air Force guys that ended up being there. But those were kind of one-off missions that just made stuff happen. Someone said, hey, can you guys go in there and do this? Yes, we can go do that. That whole time of just being an asset in theater, being available, found me getting, opportunities to do OTBs. Another squadron would come in, they're like, hey, we need a PJ. I'm like, yeah, I can do an OTB. It's not rocket science. And so, there's a lot of those opportunities that just emerged by some just good luck, being in the right place at the right time, but also being available. And so
OTB is over the beach.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Listening.
Yeah, basically swimming in, and patrolling and swimming back out. And some of it sounds cool, but it's kind of a really mundane mission. And especially when you're doing like sneaky things. Like sneaky things aren't too sexy. Yeah, it's not a lot of shooting.
Well, they sound sexy.
Yeah, I guess it depends how you say it.
Well, sneaky is pretty sexy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any operations at any point in your career that went just horribly fucking wrong?
From my perspective, or from
I guess either.
Organization?
Yeah, either.
Yeah, like I was saying, you getting compromised, trying to get to target. Those are pretty bad. I'm trying to think of in the card catalog of things, what was really bad. I think that first op with all those casualties, I think that went pretty bad.
Yeah.
I think in retrospect, people thought it was successful, but there was a lot of discovery learning going on that target by a lot of people, not just me.
Yeah.
But no, there's nothing really that pops in my head about,
Sure. Were there any ops where it felt like you guys got your asses handed to you?
Yes. CAS has saved our lives more times than not. And CAS has been the discriminating kind of qualifier between success and non-success. And so, people think that it's like this one-on-one fight, like individuals shooting other individuals. It's not. It's usually an overwhelming force. We want the competitive advantage, right? We want to go in there with overwhelming force, not take any casualties, and get out of there. But what often happens is you'll have a barricade shooter, or you'll have a few folks that have a really good fighting position, whether it be in the mountains or not. And it overwhelms the force. It pins you down and it incapacitates you. Without CAS, I think it would have been a great challenge to get out of some of those situations. And I remember one night, I guess, talking about bad mission. One night we're patrolling, and we stop in this not courtyard, but basically like a wheat field between 4 compounds. And I was with the recce team. The main assault force is pretty far behind us, and it was a partner force assault force, right? So we're going to try to get them to target and let them hit it, and then we're going to get back. And we stopped because our AC-130 got pulled from us. And so we always had dedicated CAS, so it gets pulled for a high-valued individual, so an HVI. And so the decision now is, do we keep going to target without air support, or do we turn around? Like, what's the play? And so as we're sitting there in this kind of wheat field, it's about as big as a football field, right? And so this kid comes out with a dive light and starts shining it at us. So me and this other Navy guy are sitting there, and he's shining right on us, and he's spotlighting us for the guys in the compounds. And so you can see them on top of the compounds. You can see they're carrying weapons, but this isn't even our target. Like, literally, we're halfway there. And the kid shines the dive light. And so
You say kid, ballpark age?
8, 9.
Oh, wow.
And so they sent him out there to spot us. And so he's spotting us. And so what do? Like, okay, we're made. And again, this isn't the target compound we're going after. This is just a happenstance we're there. And more men start coming up on the rooftops of these buildings. They all got guns. And so when I was telling you about, lasers everywhere, so this is back when people used to have different shaped lasers. And so you knew, hey, triangle, square. And I didn't have a cool one. I just had a regular laser. I didn't get it upgrade. So everyone's got their lasers on kind of general people, but we're overwhelmed. I think it was 6 of us in this position. We're completely vulnerable. And next thing you know, they send these dogs out, those big Afghan hounds, and they're pushing through the wheat field. And I'm like, they're coming on this animal trail. And again, I don't want to be the first one to shoot, especially as the Air Force guy. I definitely don't want to get mauled by this dog. And so I'm like, is this, because if the second I start shooting, everyone's going to shoot. You know what I mean? All those guys on the rooftop are going to start shooting at us. And I'm like, please don't come at me. Like, I don't want to have to make that decision. And it turns right before the animal trail and goes up to this hill and looks down at us. These are big dogs. And I'm like, okay, we're still good. And so it's been a few minutes now, which it seems like an eternity. Let's bound back. Let's get to a fighting position. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And next thing you know, the shooting starts. And
Do you know who shot first?
It was the guys on the top. So the round starts cracking, and a truck pulls up with a belt-fed machine gun. So they start ripping through us. RPGs are going over us, and it's like, oh wow, this is happening. And so we're shooting back the best we can. But at this point, we need to make a decision to bound back. And not my place to say anything, right? Here I am, the PJ. I'm just happy to help. Just don't get shot. Cause
I got the Band-Aids.
Yeah, I got the Band-Aids. And so we're all shooting back, and I don't know if we hit anybody or not. I mean, they're pretty long shots. But this belt-fed machine gun's ripping through this area. And what we realized was they were shooting RPGs and basically intersecting our positions, then running the belt-fed machine gun down their sights. So they're sighting it with those. Pretty smart. And so we end up deciding to bound back. And this is supposed to be like, old school bounding. You got 2-man teams. Yeah. It's just a mad dash. Everyone's running up this hill. And I'm thinking, I'm providing the base cover for these guys. I'm looking, everyone's running. I'm like, oh crap, I guess we're running. And so I'm running up this hill, and just, there's tracers everywhere. And here comes, A-10s coming on station, on-call cast, and controller just waylays everything. And it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. But again, it wasn't a fair fight because of this. They came in first for their first gun run, and then you see this wall of fire, and you're like, man, thank God. Because I don't know what we would have done.
Had they not shown up, I mean, were you in an area where even bounding, you would have been fairly pinned down?
I honestly don't know. Yeah. But it's just an example of, okay, gig's up. We can't win this. It's not like you're trading bullet for bullet, right? Yeah. Let's just end this, bring in the planes and, clean them up. So, that's the importance of like that controller. I mean, he's so essential to the fight. And controllers are always working, right? So the PJ works when things go really bad. That's when he does his actual job. The controller's always, he's got comms, he's got his stack, he's got ISR, he's doing HLZs. He's working nonstop. And so PJs can kind of hang out for a little bit. You can kind of run with the teams, just like EOD does. Yeah. There's not always an EOD problem, but they're running and gunning.
Yeah. Man, that's fucking wild. To me, that brings up a dilemma from an 8-year-old with a flashlight. Is there a point at which that basically becomes an enemy combatant for you guys? I know that's an impossible fucking scenario, but
I don't know. I remember reading that book Bravo 20 before the war started.
Yeah,
and I remember their decision. And
same thing with Operation Red Wings.
That's right. That's right. And this wasn't like that. It was, hey, he was spotting us for sure, but what would, shooting him or not shooting change? Nothing really. I mean, and I don't want that on my conscience.
Yeah. That's a tough spot to be in, no doubt about it. Once the A-10s came in, did you guys continue on with the mission, or was that you just bailed ass out of there?
The gig was up and we went back, but that was one of those ops that you're like, just wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
What's the chances in the middle of nowhere, stopping next to these compounds, and they happen to all be, I guess combatants for. But the other thing is, do you know if they are or not? Are they just protecting their turf? Do they think we're about to assault their compound?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, even that's a shitty thing to think about, right? If it's just like a village that, here's the guys protecting the village and they all got smoked because,
Ricky just happened to stop right there and wait for SR. Yeah.
Yeah, war's a real motherfucker that way, huh? Is there a craziest injury that you came across that you treated?
No, not really. I mean, nothing too crazy. I mean, just the typical stuff. Gunshot wounds are gunshot wounds.
Do you ever have like a sucking chest wound, gunshot wounds? That you
yes, with a partner force.
Yeah.
I also had, I think the most interesting one, here's another funny one with injuries, not funny, but same fire base was on when those A&A guys got shot up. The Brits were co-located with us, conventional like artillery unit. And again, they come knocking on my door because 18 Delta was in the field. They were doing their patrol to contact. And they come knocking on my door. Hey, we got casualties. Again, I think they're Brit casualties. So I grab my stuff. And they have all these Taliban fighters in their cache. And they're expending all their supplies for these Taliban who just killed a Brit soldier. And I'm thinking, my head's exploding around. I'm like, why the hell would you bring them back here? And I'm like, you seriously want me to expend my resources for these people? They just killed one of your soldiers. And so I'm like, I'll use your stuff. And so I'm helping them. And I'm doing chest tubes on these guys. I'm, needle decompressions. And I had a long beard at the time. And the Terp's with me. And the interpreter's like, he's saying you have a really nice beard as I'm treating him. I'm like, okay.
The dude that you're treating said, yeah.
I was like, I appreciate that.
So you had, I think if you play your cards right, you got a chance with that guy.
That's right.
That's fucking funny.
I don't know what his life expectancy was.
Yeah.
He's probably the mayor of Kabul right now.
Yeah, no shit. Fuck. God, what a mess. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But I'm assuming you haven't kept track, but I mean, if you had to ballpark the amount of gunshot wound individuals that you treated in your career, any idea?
Maybe 30.
Yeah. Is there a percentage of how many of them made it?
As far as I know, all of them.
Oh, wow. So I guess that's where triage comes in, right? It's like the guys that, like, this guy's not even worth working on.
Yeah, we got a lot better at medicine. And when you're in Iraq back in the day, like if you had a really bad injury, you're getting into surgery within like 30 minutes back in the day.
Yeah.
Because recognize that the folks I was with, we had dedicated helos. They were loitering, right? So they would go sit on an air logger site if it was that high risk of a target. So you had Casevac within minutes.
Yeah.
And even in Afghanistan, like we had dedicated air support. And so we knew the legs, for how far we were from, this spot. If we needed to bring the surgical team on a fixed wing platform, we'd bring them to a site and loiter. And so we had it pretty damn covered. And so when you start going to places like, Somalia in the early days where you didn't have anything, like literally using commercial aircraft, international SOS was kind of our go-to because there's no platforms. That was different because I was like, please don't get hurt because one, it's going to take me forever to get you out of here. And two, you're going to a local hospital. And that's not something I'd want to wish on anybody, blood transfusions in an African hospital is, that's scary to a lot of guys for good reason.
Oh, fuck yeah. I wouldn't want to do it. It's like gas station sushi.
Yeah.
What's that?
Corn dogs.
Well, I mean, fuck, hot dogs are at least cooked, but I'm curious in the instances where you are doing that triage type stuff, And in different environments, if guys are really bad off and basically the point where you write them off, do you do anything for them?
Fortunately, I've never had to make that decision.
Oh, okay.
And when you're really dealing with big mass casualties, I know that some people have, and I feel really bad for those dudes because we talk about it and we're kind of cavalier in saying, oh, you're expectant, we're going to put you in this pile. The reality is that no one's expectant. And if someone needs CPR, like everyone says, you don't do CPR on the battlefield. If you have enough resources, you're doing CPR. Because there's a number of reasons. The first one is that if you can, you try. And it's not as black and white as in training, oh, you're expecting to put you in this pile. The second one is that it's also confidence for the other guys that if they get shot, we're going to expend every resource to take care of you.
Sure. No, that's for sure a good point. No doubt about it. Well, I'm glad that you didn't have to do that. Were there any kind of lessons learned from guys that did that you drew from? Did they offer any insight as far as shit like that goes?
I know that the guys that were there was a target in Iraq where a house collapsed, and one of the guys was mortally wounded. They had to deal with that, but they expended every second.
Just one of our guys? Yeah. Navy?
That was really heavy for them.
Navy guy or Army? Yeah. Going back and forth between Army and Navy, I know you spent more time with the Navy, but was there anything from the Army side that you could share?
I don't have any like really good impactful stories. I didn't do like I said, the Baghdad SWAT days when they were doing 100 targets a night. Yeah. They weren't bringing peaches with them back then.
Oh, okay.
And so I was doing Navy time exclusively.
Yeah, I got you. Anything that you'd like to share from all of your time? I mean, you spent a lot of time there. It sounds like a lot of it was pretty consistent with what you've already talked about. So, not asking you to beat a dead horse, but just anything that's funny or worth sharing.
I mean, yeah. So I know you had Bill Rapier on here not too long ago. But
were you in on the Big Mish or anything like that?
Which Big Mish?
Any of them, I guess.
No, I wasn't on the Big Mish. Yeah. The Mish of the lifetime those guys got. But Bill and I were living at Eagle Base, which is just north of Kabul, and so it's between Bagram and Kabul. And there's this mountain there called Big Nasty, and so
that's a good name.
And so Bill and the chief of base were going to hike this thing. So in the morning, the three of us are going to go hike this mountain. And so we're living off. The Afghans are cooking for us, and I think I had like eggplant pizza the night before. Just nasty creations they come up with. And that morning, I'm like real sick, like stomach sick, right? And so I'm like, screw it, I'll try to make it up this mountain. And so back then I had beautiful hair, like luscious hair. I can go into 10 minutes about how beautiful that hair was.
Fabio style hair.
A long beard, and I had blonde hair on top of my head. So I was wearing all black. Remember the Mountain Hardwear fleece, kind of top and bottom, the wind stoppers. Had that. Had my rifle broken in pieces in my backpack, and Bill had his sniper rifle, and we're gonna hike this thing. And so it's literally just us going out and doing a hike in the morning. And so I've already kind of blown up the toilet before I left, and we started walking up this thing, and my guts started rumbling. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I can make it up this thing. And so I finally called Knock It Off. We're like halfway up, and I'm like, I can't do it, man. I got to go back. I got to go lay down somewhere and feel sorry for myself. Yeah. And so Bill's like, yeah, I'll cover you from this position, because we're outside the wire, we're outside the base. And I'm like, okay, I just want to get down to the Hilux, and I'll just sleep in the Hilux so you guys are come back down. And so I'm going down there, and I had the worst diarrhea, so I stop on the side of this mountain. And as I'm doing this patrol of Afghan army stops, dismounts at gunpoint, thinking I'm like some Chechen rebel or something. Holy fuck. Here I am, I'm just dying on the side of the mountain. I'm like, and so Bill's watching this, and they're all dismounted. They got heavy weapons pointed at me. I'm like, this is how I die.
Shitting myself.
Yeah, on the side of a mountain. And so I take my beanie off and fluff my hair up. I'm like, maybe they'll see I'm this, this blonde hair, blue eyed guy. Yeah. And they don't change their posture whatsoever. And I'm like, oh, it's getting real. Yeah. And so I'm like, I pull my pants up. I was like, I got to keep walking towards them. and hopefully, they'll hear that I'm American, and they're not budging. And I'm like, what's my play here? What do I do? At least advance on me and zip tie me or something. But one of the checkpoints, one of the Afghan checkpoints saw what was going down and screams running over there and like not to shoot. And he disarms this whole situation. And they kept hiking up the mountain. They left me there. But that's the first time I almost died from being sick. I was also sick in Somalia real bad, where there was like a Mexican standoff at an airfield, and I was puking outside the door, and gun trucks pointing at each other, and I honestly didn't care. I was like, just shoot me.
Yeah.
And because they had dishkas, and I was like, at least it'll be quick.
Damn. Man, that's fucking wild.
I had a lot of GI issues over the years.
Man, that's a fucking trip. Combat story-wise, anything else big mission-wise that you can share? You're on the Captain Phillips thing. Is there...
So we did a mission after that. It was basically another a hook and climb off another ship. So after that all went down, you guys all know the story. When Red came in there and did what they did, we were still on the ship, the destroyer, we're on the destroyer at this time. And Phillips was with us. So we're going to transload him. And,
did you talk to him at all?
Yeah. So I treated him when he first came off, and I brought him back to the Bainbridge. And it's funny, on that video, on that Discovery special, it's like 2 Navy SEALs and their faces are blacked out. And it's like me walking out of there with one of the other guys who's a giant. It's pretty hard to not know who that is. But so we came off, and another merchant vessel got attacked. And so they hit it with RPGs, and they thought there was pirates on this ship. And so there was, I guess it was 6 of us or 7 of us on the destroyer. And they call and say, hey, you guys, can solve problems. Will you guys, come do an underway for this merchant vessel? So the red guys are steaming back to Djibouti, and we're like, yeah. So we get into the conventional Navy, I guess they're kind of like ribs or pseudo ribs. And we climb up this thing. And I'd never been on a super tanker before. And so half the team's going to go to the superstructure and clear that thing. And we don't know where people are. But there's all these containers, lined up. And so myself and another SEAL were clearing these things one by one, and thinking between every one of them, there's going to be, some pirates there or whatever it's going to be. And we have no body armor, no helmet. We're wearing catcher's masks, on our head. And so turns out there's nobody on the ship. And all the RPGs went low order on the side, and they're stuck in there. And
all of them?
Yeah, I think there was 3 of them that were stuck in the side. I could be messing that number up, but definitely, seeing them stuck in the side and not exploded. And so we end up staying on the ship, and there's the crew on this ship are I'd never been around these. I don't know what these sailors are called, these merchant vessel guys.
Yeah.
But they look. It's like straight out of prison, And so I'm sleeping in this room with these guys. I'm like, I'm gonna get shanked in here. I was more worried about them than anybody else. We stayed on that boat or that ship for almost a couple of days, motoring with them.
Fuck, merchant marines maybe?
No, it was civilians. So what do they call them, merchant marines? I don't know. Sailors.
Yeah, fuck, I don't even know. We were on a USNS ship after the Cole got bombed. We sat on the Cole for almost 2 months and escorted it out to sea and got on the floating dry dock, and then we rode on I think it was called, I don't remember what the fucking name of it was, but it was a USNS ship that had merchant marines on it, and kind of similarly, they were a pretty motley fucking crew of dudes. There weren't very many of them, but it was a fucking surreal experience for sure. They were rough crew.
That's crazy you're out there for the Cole, because I was coming back from my first deployment as a PJ was to Turkey. We do Northern Watch, and so I was watching the fighters, over Iraq.
Yeah.
It's before the war, and the Cole got hit, and I remember I was flying back. Remember, they used to have the rotators. You'd fly in the military rotator back.
Yeah.
And there was all these ophthalmologists that were just out there for the Cole, because I guess a lot of people had eye injuries from that explosion.
Yeah.
And apparently it was pretty bad. But I had just taken, this is my first experience with Ambien. I took an Ambien on this plane, and the kid next to me, an Airforce kid, knew I was a PJ, and he wakes me up, and I'm tripping on Ambien at this point. He's like, hey man, this guy's dead next to you. I'm like, huh? I'm like, is this for real? And I look down, and this guy had a heart attack, and I'm like, oh crap. And here I'm just sweating. I'm like, the walls are caving in on me. I'm like, so I start doing CPR, and I'm like, hey, can you bring me the med kit? This is back when you used to carry knives on planes. You can carry a pocket knife. And so they bring me this med kit, and it's like a blood pressure cuff, a thermometer, like a Band-Aid.
Some exam gloves.
And I'm like, oh crap. So I grab my pocket knife and I cut the BP cuff to make a suction to get all the vomit out of his mouth. And I'm like, turn the plane around. I'm like trying to, here I am thinking, I'm like, know what I'm doing. And so they land back in Germany, and I am soaking wet from doing CPR, but I got Ambien in my system. And so they want me to, they had to investigate it because it was a fatality on the plane. And I was a young guy, and I was like, I'm gonna be in trouble. They're gonna arrest me because I'm on drugs and I did CPR. And so I'm sweating in this interview. I'm like, no, everything's pretty standard. It's like,
so he did die.
Yeah. He's older. He had, you could see he had a heart attack before. I found nitroglycerin in his pocket, so he had history of heart attacks. So unfortunately, I've never resuscitated anybody with a heart attack.
Have you ever successfully used CPR to save somebody?
No, so just saying I've never been successful.
With any CPR at all, yeah. That's
so don't have a heart attack around me.
Yeah, I'll try not to. Any other good mission stories that come to mind?
No, I mean it's hard to say. This mission for me, it was all about you wanted to be on the next big thing, but it's really hard to chase that stuff.
Yeah,
I will tell you, like in retirement, it was hard to watch the exfil of Afghanistan and not be in the military.
Sure,
that was hard to see and not understand what's going on, and potentially looking at those guys that are vulnerable and at risk, and not understanding how what jeopardy they're in, because I had a lot of former unit guys out there, and controlling the chaos, and that's hard to watch on the backside after being involved in so many important things.
Yeah,
and maybe it wasn't me that was on the X, but you're definitely in the loop of information, and it's weird being on the outside.
Was there a pivotal moment or a transition period where you decided, I'm ready to get out, and this is why?
Well, I got promoted into these more senior positions, and grateful to have those positions for sure, and grateful to try to be the leader that I wanted. But it's not the same, and you don't. It's not as fun. You're not going on driving trips to Bond or on race car driving and not shooting, and you're dealing with the bureaucracy of the military, and you're trying to fight the good fight. But we talked about in the beginning, some of those fights are out of your hands, and some of the things you can't solve. And so there's kind of a feeling of a bit of helplessness because you're not the senior leader. And as an E9, and the Air Force is different with E9s. In the Army, if you're a sergeant major and you got the combat cred, and like you've got a heavy voice in these meetings and these decisions. The Navy as well. I mean, if you're the crusty, CMC, like, man, you're going to be listened to. Air Force is a different environment where, it's the voice of an E9 is just different. I would love it to be more powerful, but I think as you get more senior, some of those leaders get tone deaf, to relying on those guys with the subject matter expertise. I don't think that the Army allows it to happen. Like the sergeant major in the Army, is God, right? And so that's the guy. And I've seen it, like I said, the same way. And I think, the Marine Corps is the same way as well, to a certain extent.
I mean, I wonder, I guess thinking about it, as you mentioned it seems like, the Air Force is much more specific to aircraft being kind of the bread and butter of the Air Force, whereas the Marines, the Army, even the Navy, the fighting forces are significant, and so people that come from there, I think it just makes more sense for that voice to carry a little more authority.
I mean, if you're a fighter pilot, you're not leading anybody but yourself, especially if you're in a single seat aircraft, and you're an 05 or an 06, and then you become a squadron commander or lead things in a different capacity. But it's different than growing up as a ground component, running and gunning on the ground, making decisions as a commander, as a captain, right? Some of the stuff the Rangers have done over the past 10 years are credible missions, right? And their leaders cut their teeth in those roles. And so in the Air Force, here it is, the enlisted guys doing those jobs, the ground combat jobs, and then there's a disparity. And in the fighter community, what is the enlisted guys are maintenance guys, and they're turning wrenches on those aircraft, and so it's just a different it's a different culture, and I think some of that bleeds over into Air Force Special Warfare. Some of the ground combat units we have, I think some of that is cultural stuff that bleeds over.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's just so few of you guys, branch-wise.
We're small, man. Yeah. And we like to think we're the center of the universe, but in the grand scheme of things, the Air Force is about planes. It's about putting, munitions on target. It's about, moving cargo. It's about all those big things. We're an afterthought.
Yeah.
You talk to other Air Force guys and they have no idea what we do and in our service.
Yeah.
And so within SOF, it's the same way.
Sure. Yeah, I had an AFSOC weather guy on last year that was, I didn't know that there were fucking special operations weathermen that play it.
Anymore. They're reconnaissance guys now.
Yeah. But just the how big of a role that actually plays, and it makes sense once you think about it and you sit down and talk to him and really get an idea and sense of what he does and what they do, and it's like, fuck, that makes sense. I never thought about it. But
in the early days of Afghanistan, it was a really important job to get those sensors up, right? And so because getting the air corridors and all those things, but as all of those things have been digitized and satellites that can predict these things, like
it's less important.
They've done a good job pivoting and saying, how do we repurpose this and make it an effective, kind of function of warfighting. And so, how important reconnaissance is. And reconnaissance, what it is now, it's more of the technical reconnaissance and those things. And, UAVs have a big portion of reconnaissance as well. So
sure.
It can go a lot of different ways.
Yeah. It's good stuff. All right, so once you decided to get out, what did that transition process look like?
So, I had the good fortune of doing the Honor Foundation for their transition program. It was awesome. Then I was like, do I want to do contracting because the money is really good, or do I want to test my hand in the corporate world, or what do I do? I don't know. And when people tell you can do whatever you want, that's paralyzing. I'm like, well, just tell me what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you can do whatever you want, Chad. I'm like,
the paradox of choice.
That doesn't help, man.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, what industry? I was like, I don't know, man. So I was kind of hoping someone would just say, this is where you need to be. Because in the military, within SOF, what the next best position is, right?
Sure.
The most prestigious role, so you fight to get there. In this brave new world of being a civilian, it's really wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, there's too many choices. Yeah, for sure. Politically, I guess now how old are you?
42.
42. So we're about the same age. Looking at, you mentioned the feeling that you had watching Afghanistan be the abortion that it was. What is your take overall, I guess, politically with all of the places that you've been, us as a nation, our involvement in them, justified or not, just kind of hindsight being 2020. How do you feel about all of your experiences that way?
Candidly, I've kind of become anti-war. And because I start to understand how cavalier politicians are with putting people in harm's way without having a clear strategy. And, if you surveyed all the guys that have had rotations in any of those AOs and said, what was the national strategy for winning the war in Afghanistan? I don't know what they would say. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. We were fighting, small tactical wins, right? And operations. It wasn't a strategy. It didn't nest in some global strategy. CT became whack-a-mole overseas, right? And it was like, hey, bad guys here, let's go whack them. And we did a great job at it. Some people use the euphemism, mowing the lawn. It's just cons. They're just going to keep popping up, keep mowing the lawn. So I think that, my opinion now is if we're going to invest national treasure, which is human beings, which is money, it's time, we need to really know where we want to be. So if we go to war again, it should be for the prosperity of the United States. I personally think we should have took every drop of oil in Iraq when we left the first time, because what was it for? And you think about the guys that really suffered was the conventional forces. They were walking the streets of Baghdad, waiting to get blown up every day, living like that for a year plus. Mm-hmm. Those guys did the hard yards in all these wars. Everyone likes to talk about how sexy special operations are, and those missions are sexy. It's cool getting on a helicopter in the middle of the night and landing to the X, right? But those are the kids, those 20-year-old kids that were patrolling, hanging it out there, driving in convoys, just waiting to get hit. I have a lot of respect for those soldiers, those Marines, those sailors, airmen that did the hard yards. So I guess to answer your question, how do I feel about it?
Not great.
It's got to be worth it.
Yeah. I don't disagree with anything you just said, and I echo those exact same sentiments. My perspective on combat and just foreign policy as it relates to combative intervention is that it's an absolute last ditch. Mm-hmm. There is no other option at this point, and we have to do it. But I also think that one, just by having that be your metric with which you use to decide to go somewhere or not, cuts out a lot of things that we've done or will do.
Yeah.
But I also think it's important that's coupled with a strategy of, if we're at a point where it's fight or flight and we're backed into this corner and we have to go do this, then we're going to go over there with the Tecumseh Sherman mentality of, I'm going to make it so fucking god awful for you guys, and we're going to take the gloves off, and we're essentially going to wipe you off the fucking map. Because that in and of itself, that mentality and then that follow through by itself alleviates a lot of future bullshit.
You're absolutely right.
Because if any country on the planet knows that, hey, we're not going to fuck with you, but if you come and fuck with us, we're going to bring every fucking resource we have to basically make you not exist anymore, and we will stop at nothing to do so. That's going to make everybody think, we're probably not going to fuck with those people. Let's just pass on that and leave these guys alone. I don't know why we don't do more of that. We pussyfoot around and half in, half out, and it just fucks the guys over. That's really what it boils down to. And I don't know what the solution is. I've had a number of guests on that. We've gone down this road and talked about what it is. In my new book, Unfuck America, which is now available as this is released. I talk at length about my thoughts on, from a political standpoint, how we basically elect the next crop of politicians in a very, very different manner. But what is your take on how to actually transition into that mentality as a political society?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because the first one was, taking the gloves off. And I think that's what all of us wanted to do in the early days. It's like, hey, if you really want to win this, you have to be savages and you have to be just as, as violent or aggressive as they are. Do you start doing, offensive IEDs, you start building VBIDs, and you just start doing the exact same thing, tit for tat. I don't know. That's a slippery slope, right? Because I think we've done a pretty decent job maintaining some kind of moral supremacy, within the world. I know that the world would probably contest that because we've been, drone striking people for 20 years. But I think that's an important factor of it, is that what do we want to do? Do we want to have that moral high road, or do we want to win? And can you have them both? I don't know. I'm not a strategist. And so, but I will say that, on the political side of things, I just, if everyone had skin in the game, right? If we said everyone was vulnerable to fighting, I think that politicians would be way more judicious in how they applied combat action around the world if their sons and daughters are the ones that are paying that price. And only a handful of them have served. There's more veterans, running for office, which is kind of cool. I know there's a bunch of SEALs that are, running for office right now. It's in the news, and they have context. And are they going to be the war hawks? I don't know, man. is there value in that? I think at times, because diplomacy doesn't work without a realistic threat standing behind it, right? And with the last administration, I thought the strike on Somalia was a pretty legit move. I mean, that sent a strong message across the world that they're not playing around. And Iran's been doing these proxy war with us for as long as we've been over there. Mm-hmm. And so that sent a very clear message. And did that help diplomacy? I think it did. So right now we're in a weird spot, just like you alluded to in the beginning. Is do other governments and militaries fear us right now? And people could say, well, do we want them to fear us? Yeah, you're damn right. We want that. They should fear our military.
Yeah,
it should be the scariest thing on the planet Earth. If it's not, we're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
And so as you dilute that capability and that perception, man, to me, it might be a PR win for them, but strategically, I think it's a nightmare for us. And so I think you got to rein that back in. I think you need to separate the culture wars from the military. Let the military be the fighting force that it's supposed to be, because that's its only function, is to fight. And if you're trying to make it this, this petri dish of, the woke mentality, I think they're incongruent, man. And I think we're seeing that. And there's a mass exodus of guys that are getting out because they don't want anything to do with it right now. And it sucks because they're warriors. One, they're excellent, professional military guys. And to see them leave is not hurting them; it's hurting the military.
Mm-hmm. It's hurting the nation ultimately. Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. The one thing I would say, where maybe I have a different perspective on how other countries view us. Does it matter? Does it not matter? I agree in that I think you have to be feared or you're going to get taken advantage of. But I also think there's an element of course, our perception of, you talked about the having some sort of morals and fighting the good fight, what have you. Is that I think where that's tricky is, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Everybody thinks they're the good guys. Even people who we consider the most vile human beings on the planet, they think they're doing the right thing. That's right. And so what's hard about that, I think, is that while our intentions in our own mind are good, just like we were talking about, whether it's dogs, kids, whatever, if we're in their country operating in their sovereign, borders, within their supposed to be sovereign borders, then it really is kind of their perception of what we're there doing and how we're doing it. And to me, that's just further highlights why it's so fucking important for us to only get involved when we absolutely have to. And to me, I've used this analogy a few times in previous shows, but I really do view foreign policy on the largest of macro scales no different than a street fight on the smallest of micro scales. You're out in town, and I actually had this really good discussion with Bill Rapier that way, because he's such a consummate fucking warrior that way. I mean, the guy lives, breathes, eats shits. I mean, that's all he does all day long. Is that, a guy like that's at fucking Burger King and somebody runs their mouth and disrespects his wife and pushes him, like, at what point are you going to say, all right, that's enough, and I think his answer, is really textbook in terms of whether it's in that scenario or, again, on the largest scale, is that you avoid it at all costs, because it's the potential of things to go wrong. Let's say he pulls a knife or a gun and I end up killing him, and now I'm in jail and now my family's not being taken care of. Was that worth it? Was that worth just walking away from somebody running their mouth being an asshole? No, it's not worth it. So I think it's that same thing, is that we don't do anything until you're basically forced to do it. But then when you do that, you go in with absolute ruthless fucking abandon, and you pull no fucking punches and just obliterate every fucking thing, with zero concern for what the public opinion is going to be. They're going to fucking hate you no matter what you do, no matter how you do it. You're going to create enemies. The same analogy with a bar fight is that you walk by a pub and there's a huge fucking turning tables over, 30 people fighting in there. If you walk in there you're going to, just by being in there, you're going to piss people off. You know, I don't care what side you take or don't take. You know, people are going to be mad because you got involved. People are going to be mad because you didn't get involved. People are going to be mad that you got involved because of how you got involved. You know, so if you decide to do that, you've got to ditch that. I'm worried about what everybody else thinks. You got to ditch it at the door and go in there and say, I'm worried about me, and I'm going to fuck everybody up in here. I mean, that's how I view it. And I think if we took that policy as a nation, we would be so far better served internationally, and I think our people would be much better taken care of and feel like they're better taken care of that way. What do you think?
I just think it's going to be different. I think that this buildup right now, you know, with what's going on with China, you know, China's building up for war, right? The stuff they're doing is very provocative. But is it going to be a man-on-man fight? I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot of proxy wars. I think there's going to be some strategic deterrence that's going to go on, obviously, you know, and those are potentially zero-sum outcomes.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, right now it's technology-driven. It's who can mobilize, who can, you know, get. I was reading the other day that, you know, China has this fleet of the same what the, you know, Nazis did in World War II, is this fleet of ships that they're converting to, you know, makeshift destroyers. You know, they're putting cannons on these things, and they're setting every condition up to fight right now. And you know, I'm looking at us. I'm like, okay, what is our posture right now? And are they scared of us right now? I mean, I don't know. If they're smart, they probably recognize that we have some capabilities that can reach out and touch them. But I just don't know if it's going to be trench warfare with them.
I don't think it's going to have to be. You know, from a technology standpoint, in conjunction with what they own here in this country and have control over.
That's the bigger problem.
I don't think they'd need to fire a shot, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have the ability to incapacitate us so fucking quickly.
And we left the door open for them.
Yeah, without really doing anything other than just disabling things.
Yeah.
That I don't even think it would fucking come to that, and I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, in our lifetime you see them pull the trigger on something like that. I really wouldn't.
I mean, supply chain, I think, is probably more devastating right now to the U.S. and every American. And then the other piece is, you know, the real estate piece with China and them, you know, being allowed to buy up, you know, hundred thousands of acres and farmland and that's business, the stuff that scares me. Yeah, businesses, warehouses. I mean, who knows what they're doing in those? Yeah. You know, owning huge swaths of land, and they're doing it all over the world. Yep. You know, in a lot of, you know, quote unquote Western allied countries. So that's the weirdest thing, though. You go to like some random hole in the wall in Africa, and you'll see a car full of Chinese people drive by. Yeah. And they stand out just as much as, you know, we do. And you're like, what are they doing here? Yeah. And they go to these countries and they exploit them for everything they got. They pay them a premium in the front end. Man, they just leave them destitute, though. Yeah. It's like locusts. Wow. Yeah, scary times in the kingdom, huh? Let's get everybody wound up. All right, so now the two organizations that you're working with, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about while we have the floor? We talked about a lot. Yeah. But yeah, so, you know, we're talking about America. We're talking about, you know, we're alluding to values and what we consider kind of common values. You know, the team I joined up with, Foxtrot 3, is like-minded guys that said, hey man, like, why should I be ashamed that I want to be a good dad? Why should I be ashamed that I fly an American flag on my house, which is a real thing in some cities and countries, or counties. Yeah. And the other piece is, you know, my faith. Should I be ashamed of, you know, that I have faith in the God that I worship? And coming out of the past year of COVID, a lot of these things have been under attack. And this isn't like a, you know, a call to action, but it is definitely a calling card that says, hey, there's more people than just me that believe this and think this way. And so, you know, this is an external message that says, you know, maybe you and I have more in common than we think. That's the first one. The other one's Lifeline rescue tools. And when they reached out to me initially, it was to, you know, see if there was utility for their products. It was designed for firefighters to go to like Pararescue. And so I helped them with some product design. But this is a tool that really is going to, you know, potentially disrupt the personal rescue system. So, you know, we looked at like first line tools, you know, what's on your first line kit. This is something that as all cars go to laminated glass around the entire car, not just the front window, on the sides, all those window punches that we used to carry are completely obsolete. You have to cut through that laminated glass. And so this thing does it without, being electrical tool like a recip saw that I would cut somebody out with. This cuts through it.
So no more throwing spark plugs, is that what you're saying?
No, man, not anymore. I mean, that was the coolest thing I ever seen when I first saw that.
How many people are going to go home and throw spark plugs at their fucking car?
Man, if you haven't done that, go to a junkyard or something.
Yeah, that's fucking priceless. Can you describe the tool? Like kind of what?
Yeah, so they have 3 tools. So one's a dive tool, which is pretty cool. It's called the Jaws, and that's a titanium tool. Scuba Pro is adopting that. I really want to see it as a loadout gear for all divers, because there's no standard dive tool. You remember that from when you were SEAL, and all the dives I did, I'd have some random tool. So
we had shitty dive knives, and that was it.
Yeah.
That were dull as fuck.
So this is to cut you off lines, entanglements, all those things. Created an airborne tool with them, which is basically like a new hook knife that John Master can have in the back of the bird to cut the stack line very quickly, but can also use for a myriad of other things. But the stealth tools, what I think is going to proliferate, to saw off, is that it's a personal rescue tool. It's got a really aggressive pattern, an access point in the back, and it slices. I should have brought one, but its teeth pattern on this thing chews through everything.
Nice.
And so the creator of this is a firefighter, and he did it for, when you're in full kit in a house and you're covered up, you got conduit maybe attached to your arm, you got to cut through it to get yourself out of a bad situation. That's where it started, and really its application, I think it should be everybody on every base, the front gate.
Yeah.
You see someone you can assist in a rescue or yourself. But yeah, so cool projects I'm able to work on now that I'm retired and able to kind of branch out into different industries. So I'm excited to be on the other side. I just got to neck it down, like we were just talking about. Everything's available.
Yeah, it's too many choices. Yeah. No, that's the damn truth. And what do you do at Doolittle right now?
So I'm the director of an innovation institute there in Florida, supporting the research lab. So the guys that make munitions on the aircraft, and so I'm able to kind of connect the operational community to the scientists and engineers, and also better understand small business and how to integrate them and give them a fighting chance. Because the Lockheeds, the Raytheons, all those folks, they know what the requirements are.
Yeah, they care about the little guys.
Yeah. So a lot of new things that are on my plate. It's given me a new kind of repertoire, new vernacular, all those things, and
well, that's good stuff. Well, Chad, I'll tell you, man, you've had a hell of a career. The highlight reel alone is hard to even have enough time to get through of all the things that you've done and places you've been, and the amount of getting your hands dirty on behalf of Uncle Sam that you've done is nothing short of inspiring. So thank you for your service, and thank you again for coming on and sharing your story. It's an amazing one, and like I said, the niche of Air Force guys attached to high-level soft units is one that so few people know anything about, myself included. I learned a shitload just sitting down with you for the last few hours, and it's been one that a lot of people have wanted to see for a long time. So thanks again for coming, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Hopefully it met the expectation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been awesome. So to you guys, the listener, as always, thank you. One thing, quick note, Unfuck America is out now, so feel free to go pick it up or choke yourself. It's about to fall over. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.